He was tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of broad that pulled seams taut even in luxury tailoring. A charcoal suit jacket sat on top, like he'd thrown it on last minute, but nothing about him felt casual. His posture, though, was unusual, hunched slightly forward, both hands gripping a phone that wasn't even unlocked, eyes down, not moving, as though the world was too loud and he had retreated into silence. "Excuse me," she said softly. He looked up. Gray. His eyes were gray, piercing and still, like the sea in winter. For a second, he didn't speak. He just studied her face, quiet, unreadable. "My beautiful new family members, if this is your first time joining us here on Love and Twilight, I want to say a big warm welcome. This channel is more than stories. It's a safe space where love, healing, and hope come alive. If you're enjoying this journey so far, don't just watch silently. Go ahead and hit the like button so YouTube can share this light with more people like you. And please subscribe to be part of our growing family, where every story carries a heartbeat, a lesson, and a reminder that you are never alone. Now, let's begin." Then he stood, towering over her as he stepped aside. She squeezed into her seat, whispering a thank you. He gave a barely perceptible nod. The moment she buckled her seatbelt, Irene exhaled. It wasn't relief. It was resignation. She hadn't slept in 3 nights. Her bones ached. Her head felt like it was packed with wet sand. She wasn't even supposed to be on this flight. Emergency leave from the hospital where she worked nights as a nurse came through at the last second. Her daughter, Petra, was in a New York hospital again. Pneumonia. Again. All she could do was show up, beg, fight, and hold her baby's hand through another crisis. "Just make it to the city," she whispered under her breath, her head already tilting sideways. The engine roared to life beneath them, and as the jet ascended, Irene's body gave up. She didn't even realize when her head drifted sideways and landed on his shoulder. He didn't move, not an inch. Most people would have flinched or nudged her awake, but not this man. He stayed perfectly still, eyes forward, body calm. Her head fit snugly against him, like the curve of his chest had been carved to hold it. And for the first time in weeks, Irene dreamed. Not about sickness, not about bills, not about her third shift nightmare of a job. She dreamed about peace, about safety, about not carrying the world on her back for once. When she stirred, it was gradual, blinking herself awake, unsure how long she'd been out. Then she realized her head was still resting. On him. Worse, her hand had somehow wandered onto his chest. And his heart? It was pounding. She sat up abruptly, heat rushing into her cheeks. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." "It's okay," he said. His voice was deep, quiet, low like a fire smoldering under snow. She glanced at him again. He wasn't looking away. He was looking directly at her, intently, like she was the one thing in the world that made sense. "I didn't mean to fall asleep on you," she said, fumbling to fix her hair. "You needed it," he replied. She blinked. "How would you know that?" His mouth twitched at the corner. Not quite a smile. "I can tell." Then, silence. Unbearable, until she caught another glimpse of him. His face. She knew that face. From newspapers, magazines, screens in hospital waiting rooms and investor conference clips. No smile. Just eyes that had seen too much and lips too rarely used. "You're—" she began, already knowing the answer. He nodded once. "Yes." Her mouth dropped open. "Oh my God, I didn't know. I didn't recognize." "It's fine," he interrupted gently. "No, it's not. Logan Vale?" He looked pained, just briefly. Yes. Irene felt a wave of nausea. She had just drooled on one of the richest men alive. She stared at him, in horror. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to." "I liked it," he said. That shut her up. His voice dropped lower. It was peaceful. He hesitated, then added, "You haven't slept in days, have you?" That did it. Her eyes welled instantly. She turned her face to the window, but not fast enough. She couldn't hide the tears that slipped free. "My daughter's in the hospital," she whispered. "I'm just trying to get to her." He didn't ask more, didn't press, didn't try to fix her. Instead, he pressed the steward call button. The flight attendant approached quickly. "Yes, Mr. Vale?" "Divert us," he said. "Manhattan Executive Airfield." I want a black Maybach waiting. Notify Westbridge Pediatrics for very important person emergency intake. The attendant blinked. Right away, sir. Irene stared at him like he'd just recited a foreign language. What are you doing? She asked. You said your daughter's in the hospital. She blinked at him. Yes, but you're with me now, he said simply. She gets what I get. The jet began descending far earlier than expected. Irene looked out the window, confused. This isn't JFK, she said slowly. No, Logan replied. It's Westbridge Executive Airfield. Less traffic. Closer to the hospital. She swallowed hard. But how do you even do that mid-flight? He didn't respond. He simply reached down, unbuckled, and stood as the seatbelt light blinked off. The steward opened the cabin door without prompting. Outside, the sleek black Maybach awaited, engine already purring, rear door held open by a sharply dressed assistant. Logan looked at her. Come. Irene stood slowly, grabbing her bag and wheeling her battered suitcase behind her. She followed him down the steps into the soft night air. The Maybach's interior felt surreal. Ivory leather, wood paneling, screens built seamlessly into every surface, champagne tucked into a holder beside her seat. Logan didn't pour any, didn't speak. He simply sat across from her, his long frame still and quiet, elbows resting on his knees, watching her reflection in the tinted window. Irene sat stiffly, acutely aware of how wrinkled her clothes were. Her blouse was creased. Her jeans had a bleach stain from the clinic laundry room. Her curls were frizzed, and her face looked tired in the overhead lights. Still, he kept glancing at her like she was holding the answers to questions he never dared ask. Finally, she broke the silence. You don't even know me. I know enough, he replied. Like what? He turned fully to her, slow and measured. You work night shifts. You're a nurse. You carry your exhaustion like armor. You didn't touch your phone once during that flight, and when I told you I was Logan Vale, you apologized before asking for anything. She blinked, caught off guard. You're not used to help, he added. You're used to being the one who helps. Irene looked away. You shouldn't assume things. I don't, he said calmly. I observe. She swallowed the lump forming in her throat. What if I told you I can't repay you for this? She asked. I didn't ask to be repaid. People like you don't just do things out of kindness. Logan's eyes flicked toward the window again. You're right. That stung more than she expected. He continued. But this isn't about kindness. It's about doing what I wish someone had done for my mother once. Irene's heart paused. The sentence hung in the air like truth too heavy to carry. She didn't press further. Instead, she stared out the opposite window, letting the silence settle. The vehicle pulled to a quiet stop outside Westbridge Pediatric Hospital. A VIP entrance opened into a marble-floored hallway, flanked by two staff in uniform. Miss Castillo? A woman in a dark suit asked. Irene nodded, still holding her bag tight against her chest. We've already admitted your daughter. We received the file electronically. She's being monitored by our top pediatric pulmonologist. Her vitals are stable. What? Irene whispered. Already. Logan had stepped behind her. I sent the records when you fell asleep, he said. She spun around. How did you get access to that? You had your hospital badge hanging off your bag. I traced the network, accessed Petra's most recent vitals through emergency protocol. My CTO is on the board of this hospital. Irene's breath caught. The woman in the suit stepped forward. Would you like to see your daughter? Irene nodded furiously. Petra was small for a 6-year-old. Her frame looked even smaller in the king-sized pediatric bed, surrounded by blinking monitors and quiet machines. Her curls were damp, forehead slightly fevered, but she was breathing, even, steady. Irene rushed forward, dropping her bag to the floor and gripping Petra's tiny hand. She kissed it, whispered a dozen soft things all at once, nonsense, lullabies, prayers. Logan stood at the doorway. He didn't step in, just watched. Irene turned after a while. Thank you. He nodded once, and turned to leave. But before he vanished down the corridor, he walked back to her side, slipped something into her hand. A slim black card. Use it if you need anything. I'll be back tomorrow. Then he was gone. That night, Irene didn't sleep. She sat beside Petra's bed, listening to the steady beep of oxygen monitors and the occasional nurse's footsteps. She didn't call anyone. Didn't check social media. Didn't think about rent or unpaid bills. She just sat. At one point, she turned the card in her hand. It didn't say Logan Vale. It simply had an embossed number. No name, no title. The back had a short message in small text. You're not alone anymore. Her chest tightened. She wiped her eyes before the tears could fall. The next morning, the room door opened at exactly 7 a.m. Logan stood there. This time, no suit. Just black slacks, a white dress shirt, no tie, the top buttons undone, sleeves casually rolled, and a small bag in one hand. He walked over and set it down on the tray beside her. Breakfast. Irene looked at it. Real food. A fresh croissant, fruit, warm oatmeal, coffee with almond milk and honey, the way she liked it. How? You ordered it once in a hospital cafeteria 2 years ago. The system remembers. You tracked that? I own the system. She almost laughed. You really are terrifying. I'm not trying to be. She took the coffee, wrapped her hands around it. It was hot, real, grounding. Logan didn't sit, just stood there. I'm not used to being looked after, she said softly. Get used to it. She turned her head slowly toward him. He didn't blink, didn't look away. She didn't either. And for the first time in a long time, Irene believed someone might actually mean it when they said, "You're not alone." The next morning unfolded like it belonged to someone else. Petra's breathing had stabilized. Doctors now used words like improvement and responsive. The stress that had lived behind Irene's eyes for weeks began to lift, not vanish, but loosen. Just enough to let hope in. She stepped into the hospital hallway, arms wrapped around herself. Her hair was hastily tied, her scrubs rumpled, but she needed a breath of air. She wasn't expecting to find him there. Logan, leaning casually against the wall outside the ICU suite. Phone in one hand, untouched coffee in the other. She stopped. "You're still here?" she asked, surprised. He didn't look up from his phone. "I said I'd come back. I didn't expect you to mean it." He did look up then. "I always mean it." She shifted uncomfortably. "You didn't have to stay. I didn't have anywhere more important to be." She didn't know what to say to that. Minutes later, they stood outside in the morning air. The private driveway was lined with black sedans and flowered planters. No noise, no chaos, just stillness. Logan stood beside her, watching the street like it was a puzzle only he could solve. "I should probably go home and shower," Irene said. "Can't keep looking like a mess." "You're not a mess." She gave a weak laugh. "You have no idea." "I do." He turned to her. "I see someone who hasn't rested in days and still manages to stand. Someone who's fought more battles in silence than most people ever will." She blinked hard. His voice lowered. "You don't owe me strength, Irene. You've already given enough." Her chest ached in that place where kindness hadn't reached in years. The ride from the hospital was arranged before she even thought to ask. A driver in a pressed black suit opened the back door of the Maybach again. Logan didn't even glance at him, just gestured for Irene to get in. "You don't have to do this," she said, half protesting. "You keep saying that," Logan replied, as if it's a bad thing to be helped. She bit her lip but climbed in. He followed her. The doors closed. Silence fell again. But it wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was loaded, not with tension, but possibility. "Where are we going?" she asked finally. "Someplace quiet," he said. "I want to show you something." Her heart thumped. "Am I supposed to be scared? If you were, you wouldn't have gotten in the car." That shut her up. The Maybach glided through Manhattan's heart and then veered into a private entrance, a steel. Gate opening automatically at the base of a skyscraper so tall it seemed to touch the sky. "Wait," Irene whispered, recognizing the building. "Do you live here?" He didn't answer. The car pulled into an underground entrance. Elevators waited. No security check. No delay. Just silent efficiency. Inside the elevator, Logan pressed the top floor. They rode in silence. The higher they went, the more she felt like she was being lifted into someone else's world. And in truth, she was. When the elevator doors opened, Irene gasped. It wasn't a penthouse. It was a realm. Polished black floors, expansive glass walls, a piano in the corner that looked untouched but meaningful, shelves filled with rare books and single editions, a fireplace flickering low despite the season. There was no clutter, no warmth, except him. He stood there, like the room's only living thing. She turned around in awe. "It's beautiful. It's lonely," he replied. Her eyes moved to his. "You brought me here to show me your loneliness?" "No. I brought you here to see if mine could survive your presence." She walked slowly to the floor-to-ceiling window, overlooking the city. "I can't be bought," she said quietly, turning back to him. "I'm not trying to buy you." "Then what is this?" "A gesture." "Of what?" He took a step closer. "Of a man who hasn't let anyone in for years, who hasn't cared about someone's sleep patterns, or what they eat, or how scared they look when they talk about their daughter." She looked up at him. "You don't know me, Logan. I know what it felt like to hold you when you didn't know I was watching you breathe." The silence was deafening. Then his voice dropped to something she felt in her bones. "You don't have to stay. I just wanted you to know that if you ever need somewhere to land, this place, this man, this moment, will be here." Irene stepped toward him, unsure if it was her heart or her feet that moved first. "You don't say much," she said. "I was afraid if I did, I'd ruin everything." He was close now, inches away, and the wall between them? It cracked. She didn't kiss him. He didn't kiss her. They just stood there, breathing each other in, the distance between strangers and something else closing. The night was quiet inside the hospital's VIP suite. Machines beeped steadily. Petra's breathing had eased into a calm rhythm. Irene, finally allowing herself to exhale, sat curled up in the reclining chair beside her daughter's bed. She hadn't planned to sleep, but exhaustion won again. By the time dawn peeked through the window, she woke with a stiff neck and groggy eyes. Petra was still sleeping peacefully. Irene stretched her arms overhead, then blinked hard, trying to reorient herself. And that's when she saw him, through the glass wall of the ICU. Logan, standing just beyond the threshold, watching. He was dressed in a slate-gray crewneck and tailored black pants. No entourage, no noise, just stillness. He hadn't knocked, hadn't spoken, just stood there, hands in his pockets, observing without intrusion. For a man who owned towers and traded in billions, he had the presence of someone who waited for permission, not privilege. Irene stood up slowly and walked to the door. She cracked it open. "You've been here long?" His gaze met hers. "Since just before sunrise." She frowned slightly. "Why?" "I told you yesterday," he said softly. "I said I'd be back." She studied his face, not just the angles and sharp lines, but the weariness around his eyes. "You slept?" He shook his head. "Didn't feel like it. You have an empire to run." His expression didn't change. "They'll survive." Minutes later, they sat on a hospital terrace overlooking a small rooftop garden. Irene cradled a cup of tea. Logan sat beside her, his long legs stretched out, hands resting on the arms of the bench. A nurse passed behind them, whispering something into a walkie. Still, he didn't move, didn't fidget, just watched the skyline in silence. "You didn't have to come again," she said. "I wanted to." She glanced sideways. "You don't seem like the type who wants anything." Logan's voice was quiet. "Wanting scares people like me." That made her pause. "Why?" "Because we're used to people only appearing when they need something." She looked down at her tea. "You think that's what I am?" "No," he said, not missing a beat. "If I did, I wouldn't be sitting here." She took a slow breath. "You watched us through the glass. You just stood there. I didn't want to disturb you." "Why?" "Because it was beautiful." Irene turned fully now. "You call that beautiful? A woman with dark circles, morning breath, and hospital slippers?" His voice stayed even. "You weren't pretending. You weren't performing. You were just being her mother. That's the most powerful thing I've ever seen." Her throat tightened. She looked away again. "You're good at that." "At what?" "Saying things no one said before." "I'm not trying to impress you," he said. "I just don't lie." She let out a breath. "Well, you should know, I don't impress easily either." "Good," he said. "I wouldn't want this to be easy." As they returned to Petra's suite, the hallway buzzed with movement. Nurses switching shifts. An assistant from Logan's office briefly caught up with him to whisper something. He turned to Irene. "Will you be okay here for a few hours?" She nodded. "Petra's sleeping, and I brought a book." He handed her a sleek white envelope. "Just in case." She frowned. "What's this?" "Apartment keys. building 2 floors below mine. I had it cleaned, stocked with food, just somewhere for you to catch your breath. Logan, no pressure. You can say no. But I didn't want you going back to whatever place you were staying before this. She held the envelope carefully. I've got my name on leases I can't afford, she whispered. I've been avoiding my landlord for 2 weeks. He didn't say a word, just stepped closer. Then don't go back, he said. Start over somewhere no one's chasing you. She bit her lip. Then slowly, she nodded. He didn't smile, but something shifted in his eyes, like he'd been holding his breath. Back in Petra's room, Irene sat again beside her daughter's bed. She watched her baby breathe, then looked down at the keys in her hand. It wasn't just about real estate or favors. It was about something she couldn't name. She was used to being useful, not cherished, to fighting, not receiving. But for the first time in years, someone hadn't offered help out of guilt or pity. He offered it because he saw her, not the tired eyes, not the nurse badge, not the desperation, just her. The apartment was exactly as he'd described it, except it wasn't. It wasn't somewhere to catch your breath. It was sanctuary. Irene walked slowly through the space. Hardwood floors, a cream-colored sofa, a glass table with a vase already filled with white orchids. In the kitchen, everything gleamed, like it had never been touched. On the counter, a small stack of folded clothes sat beside a neatly arranged grocery delivery receipt. Yogurt, berries, organic snacks, oat milk, whole grain bread. Things she used to buy before bills took priority. Her chest rose slowly. It was too much, but it was real, and for once, it was hers to accept. She opened the bedroom door and saw a large bed, plush and made, with sunlight streaming through the tall windows. And sitting quietly on the nightstand, a handwritten note. I'll be upstairs if you need anything. Don't knock. Just walk in. No one else can. L. She stared at it for a long time. 3 hours later, after the first proper shower she'd had in days, Irene returned to the hospital. Petra was still resting peacefully. The ICU nurse waved her over. Your friend came by again. Friend? The woman smiled. Mr. Vale. He brought this. She held up a small stuffed animal, an Arctic fox in a tiny navy hoodie with Petra's name embroidered across the chest. Irene's throat tightened. He didn't say much, the nurse added. But you should know something. What? He didn't ask about Petra's condition. He recited her entire chart. Every dosage, every fluctuation in her vitals over the past 72 hours. By memory. Irene blinked. The nurse smiled gently. That man doesn't just throw money at problems. He studies them, learns them. It's rare, especially in men with that much power. She nodded, too stunned to speak. Later that evening, Logan returned. He didn't walk in like a visitor. He stepped in like someone who was used to being invisible in plain sight. He wore no jacket, just a simple black shirt tucked into jeans. Irene was sitting cross-legged on the couch in Petra's room, sketching something in her notepad. He raised an eyebrow. You draw? She shrugged. Just patterns. Helps me think. He sat in the armchair across from her, studying the lines she was drawing. You always move like this, she said suddenly. He looked up. Like what? Quiet, watching everyone else, never speaking first. Logan leaned back. I speak when necessary. And it's not necessary now? I'm listening. To what? You. She closed the notepad. I don't know what you think I am, she said carefully. But I'm not some fragile thing you have to rescue. I know that. Do you? You think I'm only doing this because I feel sorry for you? I think you've spent so long building a wall that now you don't know what to do when someone actually sees through it. His eyes didn't flinch. That's fair. She stared at him, watching the way he folded his hands together. Calm, measured. What happened to you? She asked. He didn't answer immediately. Then he stood up and walked to the window, staring down at the city far below. When I was 10, he said, my father left us, disappeared overnight, no note, no explanation. My mother worked 3 jobs. We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment over a laundromat in Queens. She stayed silent, letting him continue. By 16, I was coding illegally for hedge funds. By 21, I was being sued by 2 governments. By 25, I'd already made my first billion. And by 30, I'd lost most of my friends to envy, greed, or fear. He turned to face her. I stopped letting anyone in because it was easier than being left. She stood up slowly. You know, she said, you're not the only one who's been abandoned. I know. I've had people walk away too. Men who promised to stay. Family who judged me for keeping my child. Jobs that saw me as disposable. She stepped closer. We've both been alone, Logan. But alone doesn't have to be permanent. His jaw twitched. I don't know how to do this, he said quietly. Do what? Let someone stay. You don't have to, she replied. Just don't push me away when I try. He looked at her like she was some language he'd never learned, but suddenly needed to speak. Then, without asking, he reached out, touched her wrist, and didn't let go. That night, after Petra had fallen asleep again and the monitors hummed their steady rhythm, Logan walked Irene to the car waiting downstairs. They didn't speak, not in the elevator, not in the lobby, not until they were back in the car. I didn't thank you, she said softly. For what? For remembering everything about my daughter, for making this easier. Logan shook his head. I didn't do it to be thanked. Why did you do it? He didn't look at her. Instead, he stared out the window. I think I was waiting, he said. For what? For someone who would see me. Not the money, not the empire, just me. And now? He turned to her slowly. I think I found her. She didn't answer. Didn't have to. Her hand found his. And for once, he didn't pull away. The rooftop garden was quiet. High above the traffic and the chaos, it offered a different kind of stillness, one that came not from silence, but from presence. Irene stood near the railing, hands lightly gripping the edge, watching. The skyline as the golden hour cast a soft glow across the buildings. She didn't hear his footsteps, but she knew it was him. Logan. The shift in the air told her. She didn't turn around immediately. Instead, she whispered, I can't remember the last time I stood still. His voice came from behind her, low and steady. You always look like you're bracing for the next blow. She closed her eyes. That's because I usually am. A long pause passed between them. Then she felt him, close now, not touching, just there. His presence was as large as ever, but different now, less like armor, more like protection. He stepped closer until he stood beside her, their shoulders almost touching. You saved her, she said quietly. I didn't. You did. I only made a call. She turned, facing him fully. People like you make calls every day, but you don't show up to watch. You don't come back the next morning. You don't memorize charts. You don't stand outside ICU glass walls. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. You don't even know me, she added. I know what your strength looks like when no one's watching. That made her chest tighten. And then, slowly, she reached up. Her fingers brushed his chest. Not out of need, but recognition. A man who had carried his own pain in silence for too long. His breath hitched. One hand lifted, just barely, and hovered near her cheek. He didn't touch her, not until she leaned in, just slightly. That was all the permission he needed. His palm found her jaw, thumb tracing a line beneath her cheekbone. She tilted into the touch without thinking. I don't do this, he said quietly. I don't either. His lips were close now, but still waiting for a sign, a breath, a choice. She closed the distance. The kiss wasn't rushed, wasn't searching. It was an answer to a question neither of them had dared to speak aloud. His mouth moved slowly against hers, like he was relearning the meaning of closeness. Her hands found his waist, then his back, fingers curling in the fabric of his shirt. When they finally pulled apart, it wasn't with embarrassment. It was with awareness of something real, something no longer hiding in the shadows. He pressed his forehead to hers, eyes closed. Tell me to stop, he whispered. She didn't. Later that night, back inside the penthouse, the silence felt different. Not empty, but waiting. She stood in the middle of the living room, her arms loosely crossed, unsure what to do next. Logan walked to the kitchen and poured water into a crystal glass. He brought it to her without a word. She drank, then looked up at him. Do you always watch people this much? Only when I can't help it. She took another sip, then set the glass down. You're not what I expected, she said. Neither are you. They stood facing each other. She reached for his hand this time, threaded her fingers through his. His grip was warm, careful, like holding something he thought might vanish if he moved too quickly. She took a step closer. So did he. And then they kissed again. Not the kiss of curiosity, but of intent. This time, when he pulled her close, his hands didn't hesitate. One hand slid up her back. The other rested against her neck. Her fingers clutched his shirt as his lips deepened against hers. He lifted her gently. She gasped, but didn't resist. His mouth trailed along her jaw, down her throat, until she tilted her head, giving him access to the soft curve of her neck. He paused only to whisper, "You've been carrying the world." Her voice trembled. "Let me carry something too." He drew her against him with a tenderness that made her knees weaken. And then he carried her, down the hallway, through the open door of his bedroom. He didn't rush. He didn't ask again. He just placed her on the bed with reverence, like someone setting down something sacred. And for the first time in years, Irene didn't feel responsible for anyone else. Not for the world. Not for survival. Just for being fully, unapologetically present. With him. Morning sunlight crept in through the wall of glass. The city below stirred to life, unaware that on the 80th floor of one of its tallest buildings, everything had shifted. Irene blinked slowly, disoriented at first. She wasn't in a cramped apartment. She wasn't in the hospital recliner. And she wasn't alone. She was wrapped in silk sheets that smelled faintly of him. Logan. The space beside her was empty, but the warmth remained. She sat up, letting the sheets slip down her shoulders. The room was minimalist but expensive, drenched in soft shadows and silence. Then she heard it, quiet footsteps in the distance. Moments later he appeared in the doorway, barefoot, sleeves rolled, a fresh shirt on. No tie, hair damp. "You're awake," he said. She nodded, brushing hair from her eyes. "How long have you been up?" "Couple hours." "Thinking?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped inside, holding a mug of tea. You." She took it carefully, fingers brushing his. "Thank you." He sat at the edge of the bed, not touching her. She sipped slowly, eyes on him. "I don't do this," she said quietly. He met her gaze. "I know. It's not a habit, not something I'm good at. I didn't expect it to be." She searched his face for anything that hinted at regret. There wasn't any, only stillness and depth. "I thought maybe you'd act different this morning," she admitted. "How?" Distant. Changed. His tone was even. "I don't say things I don't mean. You said very little last night. I meant all of it." That silence again. The kind that wasn't empty, but heavy. Then he stood, pacing slowly toward the window, looking out at the world he usually ruled from afar. "When I first built this place, I imagined I'd fill it with people," he said. "Business partners, women I'd impress, events, power." He turned to her. "But no one ever stayed long. Not because I pushed them away, but because none of them ever saw past the glass." Her voice was soft. "You mean the view?" "I mean me." Irene rose from the bed, dragging the sheet along her body. She walked to where he stood and leaned her shoulder gently against his arm. "I don't need your skyline," she whispered. "I need your truth." He looked down at her. "You already have it." She tilted her head. "All of it?" "No. Not yet." They stood like that for a moment, quiet, close, steady. Then he turned, lifting her chin with his fingers. "You didn't run," he said. "You didn't give me a reason to." He leaned forward, kissed her again, this time slower, deeper. When he pulled away, his voice was lower. "Let me show you something." She followed him through the penthouse, past the clean lines of the living room and into a corridor she hadn't noticed before. He unlocked a door at the very end. It opened to something unexpected. A room with no windows, no lights, just walls lined with digital screens, security feeds, data projections, code flowing across displays. A command center. "Is this your office?" she asked. "No," he said. "It's the part of me I never show." She walked slowly around the space. Her reflection flickered in the screens. "You live in the clouds," she murmured, "and watch everything from above." "Why show me this?" "Because if I'm going to let anyone in, it should be the person who fell asleep on my shoulder without asking for anything." She stopped and turned to him. "That night," she said, "I thought I was alone. But your stillness, it felt like someone had drawn a line around me and said, nothing can hurt her now." He stepped closer. That's what I was trying to do. You did. He didn't smile, but his hand found her waist. She reached for his wrist, feeling the slow, strong pulse there. And for the first time he looked less like a man who ran empires and more like one who was terrified of losing something fragile. Later that afternoon, they sat together on the penthouse balcony, watching the sunset fall between the buildings. Irene leaned into his side, bare feet tucked beneath her. You know, she said, I used to think rich men were all the same. He glanced at her. And now? You're still ridiculous, she said, but different. Because I let you in? No, she said, because you never tried to keep me out. He turned his head. That's not entirely true. She raised an eyebrow. He continued, you just didn't let the walls stop you. She smiled. And for the first time, he did too. A real one. Quiet, subtle, but honest, like he hadn't smiled in years. Night deepened across the skyline, casting the city into a sea of golden dots below them. Inside the penthouse, the lights were dimmed, and the air felt different, not because of what had happened between them, but because of what hadn't needed to be said. Irene walked barefoot across the black floors, wearing only one of Logan's dress shirts. It swallowed her frame, but the comfort of it warmed her more than silk ever could. She found him in the kitchen. He was pouring sparkling water into 2 glasses, sleeves rolled up again, eyes focused on the bubbles rising. You never sleep, do you? She asked, leaning against the marble counter. I rest, he said, but not easily. She tilted her head. You live in a palace and don't know peace? His jaw moved once before he answered. Peace doesn't come from space, it comes from who fills it. He handed her a glass. Their fingers touched, lingered. She sipped, watching him over the rim. You're different tonight, she said. Different how? Softer. He hesitated. Not softer, just less afraid. She set the glass down. Of me? Of what I might feel around you. Irene crossed to him, placing her hands flat on his chest. His heart thudded beneath her palms, steady, strong, but not guarded anymore. You don't have to say anything, she murmured. I see you. His hands rose, slipping to her waist, then slowly around her back. He drew her close, head bowed, forehead resting lightly against hers. They stood in silence, the kind of silence that said everything. Later in the bedroom, she lay stretched across the bed as Logan knelt at the edge, undoing the final button of his shirt. The city lights glimmered behind him, but Irene's eyes were fixed on the man in front of her, no longer untouchable, no longer hidden. His shirt fell to the floor. She sat up slowly, reaching for his hand. He joined her without a word. There was no urgency, only presence. His hands explored her like a memory he didn't want to forget. She lay back, pulling him with her, mouth meeting his in rhythm, slower this time, deeper, like they were discovering something sacred in each other. He trailed his fingers down her side, over her hip, across the curve of her thigh, then back up again, learning her without words. Every gasp she gave, every arch of her back, every whispered moan was a confirmation she wanted this. Not because he was powerful, but because, with him, she no longer had to be. Afterward, he lay on his back, one arm beneath her, the other tracing slow lines along her spine. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, she whispered, Do you think this is real? He didn't answer right away. Then, yes. She lifted her head to look at him. Why? Because nothing about you feels temporary. She swallowed. And then to his surprise, she laughed quietly. First time I met you, I had no idea who you were. He raised an eyebrow. You were just the quiet guy in seat 3B, she said. And you were the woman who drooled on my shoulder. She smiled. Don't remind me. I think that's when I started falling. Irene stilled. Falling? He nodded once. I don't know what this is becoming, she said softly. Neither do I, he admitted. But I know it's the first thing that's made sense in a long time. She placed her hand on his chest again, felt the steady beat beneath her palm, no longer racing, no longer guarded, just there. She rested her head there, and for the first time in what felt like years, she slept, deeply, without fear, without flinching at every sound, because this time she wasn't carrying the weight of the world alone, and this time she wasn't waking up in a place she didn't belong. She was exactly where she wanted to be. The rain began around dawn, soft, steady, and distant, the kind of sound that lingers in dreams. Irene stirred beneath the silk sheets, her body still relaxed from the night before. Her arm reached across the bed, fingertips brushing warm skin. Logan lay beside her, eyes open, staring at the ceiling as if caught in thought. "You don't sleep," she said, voice still husky. "I do now," he replied, turning his head slightly to look at her. But not for long. She rolled toward him and rested her cheek on his chest, fingers drawing slow circles over the faint scar near his ribcage. "You've got a lot of these," she murmured. "Too many sports, too many accidents, too much pride." She kissed it gently. "I could list off mine too," she said. "Most of them aren't physical." "I know." He rested his hand on her lower back, anchoring her in place. She tilted her face up. "You're hard to read. Even now. I've spent my whole life being unreadable on purpose. What are you afraid people will find if they look too closely?" He didn't answer right away. Then he sat up slightly, resting on one elbow. "That I never had a plan for any of this," he said. "The money, the company, the name. I chased it because I thought it would make me feel like I mattered. And did it. For a while. And now," he looked down at her. "Now it just feels like armor." Irene reached for his hand. "Then take it off." He raised an eyebrow. "I mean it," she said. "Not just your clothes. Take off the walls. Let someone see you. You saw me before I ever said a word. And I stayed. You did." He pulled her close again. The air shifted. Not heated, but honest. The kind of intimacy that has nothing to do with bodies and everything to do with presence. They lay there, not needing to speak. But eventually she broke the stillness. "What was your mother like?" That made him go quiet. She almost regretted asking, until he answered. "She was strong," he said, "and sad. Every day she smiled like it didn't hurt to be alone." Irene understood that kind of woman too well. "She raised you alone?" "Until I was 15. Then she got sick. I tried to keep it hidden, did everything myself. That's when I started coding. For survival." He nodded. She traced a fingertip down his arm. "Your silence isn't cold, Logan. It's cautious. But it's not who you are." He looked at her again. "You say things like you've known me forever. Maybe I've just known too many people who wear the same kind of silence." She leaned in, brushing her lips against his. This time, there was no heat behind it, just comfort. A kind of vow, without needing to speak it. By late morning, they sat across from each other at the penthouse kitchen island, sipping coffee. Logan had changed into black slacks and a gray t-shirt. Irene wore a fresh blouse from the closet he'd stocked with clothes in her size. "I should head back to the hospital," she said, breaking the quiet. "I had an update sent from the attending. Petra's stable. Her fever broke." Relief rushed into her chest, but so did a twinge of guilt. "I still want to be there." "I know," he said. "I'll take you." She blinked. "You don't have to. I know." He stood and grabbed his keys. No argument, no delay, just presence. The drive was quiet again, but it wasn't the kind of silence that felt awkward or heavy. It was simply theirs. When they pulled up to the hospital's private entrance, he opened her door before the driver could move. "I'll be in meetings most of the afternoon," he said. "But if anything changes, I'll call," she finished. He hesitated for a moment, then leaned down, pressed a kiss to her forehead. She touched his chest and walked inside. She spent them at Petra's bedside, speaking softly, helping the nurses, and stealing glances. At the hospital room door, though she never admitted to herself what she was hoping to see. By evening, Petra's eyes opened fully for the first time in days. "Mom?" Her voice rasped. "I'm right here, baby," Irene said, rushing to hold her hand. Petra blinked slowly. "Did we make it to New York?" "Yes. And that man—" "What man?" "The one who told me I was the strongest girl he'd ever seen. He said he knew you." Irene stilled. "He was here?" Petra nodded. "He brought me the fox." Irene looked at the toy beside the bed, then whispered, "He stayed." Her daughter's eyes closed again, but the faintest smile lingered on her lips. That night, Irene returned to the apartment below Logan's penthouse. The lights were soft. A fresh meal had been delivered, and a note waited on the counter. "I won't ask you to stay, but if you do, the door will always be open." She stared at it for a long time, then folded it neatly, and without another thought, she took the elevator upstairs. This time, she didn't knock. She didn't hesitate. She walked into his world, like she belonged there. Because somewhere between exhaustion and grace, she already did. The morning Petra was discharged, the hospital suite felt unusually silent. Irene packed slowly, folding her daughter's small clothes into a bag with care. The doctors had cleared her for recovery at home, provided she remained under observation for a week. But there was no home to return to, not the one they'd left behind, and definitely not the one she stood in now. She zipped the bag and turned just as Logan appeared in the doorway. Dressed in a black half-zip and matching trousers, he looked relaxed but alert. One hand in his pocket, the other holding a folded paper from the hospital's chief of staff. "She's good to go," he said, offering it to Irene. "I know. Did you want me to arrange transport?" She hesitated. "Actually, I have to ask you something." His gaze didn't flinch. "Anything." Irene straightened. "You said you got us an apartment, but you never told me where it was." He stepped aside. 2 floors below mine. Her eyes narrowed. "You're serious?" "Yes." "You're putting me directly under your home?" He nodded once. "I thought about putting you on the same floor, but I figured you'd want space." Irene paused, processing. "It's not just about convenience, is it?" she asked quietly. "No. Then what?" "It's safety," he said. "Proximity. And if I'm honest, maybe a little selfish." She tilted her head. "I like knowing you're close," he admitted. Irene folded her arms. "What happens when this becomes complicated?" "It already is," he replied. "But I'm not afraid of complicated." Before she could respond, Petra's voice called from behind her. "Mom?" Irene turned. "Yes, baby?" Petra sat up, her curls a little messy, her cheeks finally showing color again. "Can he come with us?" she asked, pointing to Logan. He blinked. "With you?" "To the new place." Irene glanced between them. "He has a meeting soon." "It can wait," Logan interrupted. Petra tilted her head. "You're always in suits. Do you even know how to relax?" He actually smiled. "I'm learning." She studied him like a little detective. "Are you going to live with us?" "Not quite," Logan said gently, "but I'll be close by." Petra paused. "Okay," she said, "as long as you don't bring any loud shoes." Irene covered a laugh. Logan gave her a mock solemn nod. No loud shoes, understood. The new apartment wasn't just spacious. It was intentional. Warm tones filled the space. Light wood floors, soft gray furniture, kitchen stocked with essentials. Petra's room had already been set up with a twin bed, shelves for books, a desk in the corner, and a telescope on the balcony. Irene stopped walking as soon as she saw it. She turned to him. "You remembered. You said she loved stars." "She does." Petra ran straight to it. "I can see the moon." Logan stood beside Irene just far enough not to crowd her, but close enough that she felt the heat of his presence. "I thought you might both need a space that doesn't feel borrowed," he said. She turned slowly. "And this? What do you call this?" He met her gaze. "Yours." Her eyes softened. "You're going to make it very hard to walk away from all this." "I'm not asking you to stay because of the comfort," he said, "or the view, or what I can provide." "Then why?" "Because when Petra looked at me earlier, like I was someone she trusted without, needing a reason, I knew I couldn't pretend this was temporary anymore." Irene didn't answer. Didn't need to. She leaned forward and kissed him. Not a question, not a promise, just a moment. Honest, immediate, real. Petra fell asleep early that night, worn out from discharge paperwork and her first real meal in a week. Irene tucked her in and dimmed the lights. Logan stood in the hallway, watching them through the cracked door. "She's strong," he whispered as Irene stepped out. "She had to be." They moved to the living room. She poured 2 glasses of water, handed one to him. They didn't sit far apart. "You could have sent anyone else to handle all this," she said. "I didn't want to. You know this feels dangerous." He nodded. "I've lived my entire life avoiding danger, and look where that got me. And where is that?" "Alone," he said quietly. "Until you." Irene's fingers tightened slightly on her glass. "I'm not going to pretend I know where this is going," she said. "But I do know you make her smile. That counts for more than anything." He reached for her hand, held it. No pressure, just contact, something steady in a world that often wasn't. Then, after a few minutes, she spoke again. She asked me earlier if you were going to be her new dad. Logan didn't flinch. What did you say? I said she should ask you herself. He leaned back slightly. That's not something I take lightly. I know. But if I'm being honest, he said, voice raw now, I haven't stopped thinking about what it would mean to deserve that. She stared at him, heart slowing. And then, she whispered, maybe you already do. The following morning, the apartment felt different, lighter, not because of the sun filtering in through the wide windows, but because Petra was laughing again. She sat cross-legged on the living room rug, building a spaceship out of colorful blocks, her hair in 2 uneven puffs. Logan knelt nearby, sleeves rolled up, tie discarded, watching with unusual focus as she explained where the control center would go. No, not there, she corrected gently. You have to balance it with this piece. He held up a curved panel. Like this? Exactly. She nodded, satisfied. Irene stood in the hallway, watching them both. She wasn't used to this stillness. Not in men, not in her daughter. Petra rarely let anyone into her make-believe world. But Logan wasn't just tolerated, he was welcome. And he wasn't pretending to be interested. He was there, present, fully. Irene stepped into the room just as Petra clapped her hands. It's finished. Can I fly it? Logan asked. Petra giggled. It's not real. Could have fooled me, he said, handing her the finished ship. She turned toward her mother. Do we have any orange juice? In the fridge, Irene said. I'll get it. Petra hopped up and trotted to the kitchen, humming under her breath. The moment she was gone, Logan sat back on his heels. She's brilliant, he said quietly. She's also stubborn, Irene replied. Like her mother. He looked up at her and didn't say anything, just looked. She felt it, his gaze, deep and unblinking. Not intense in the way men sometimes stared at women, but thoughtful, careful, like he was piecing her together with every blink. What? She asked softly. He didn't drop his gaze. You're calm today. Because she's smiling again. He nodded. But it's more than that. She shifted slightly. Maybe I slept for more than 3 hours. He reached forward, brushing a strand of hair from her face. You're not carrying the same weight this morning. That's your fault. His brow lifted slightly. You did this, she said. Not just the medical care. The peace. You gave her life, he said. I just held the door open. She touched his wrist. Why do you keep doing this? What? Looking at me like that. He didn't blink. Because I've never seen anyone more powerful in my life. Before she could respond, Petra returned with the juice in both hands. I didn't spill a drop, she announced proudly. Logan smiled. Clearly you're in charge. Of everything, she declared, plopping back down. They spent the rest of the morning like that. Easy conversation, quiet understanding, laughter when no one forced it. Irene didn't realize how much she had missed this kind of presence. Someone who didn't drain her. Someone who didn't expect her to earn rest. Someone who gave, not out of obligation, but desire. By noon, Petra was napping. Irene and Logan stood on the balcony, both holding mugs of tea. The city stretched endlessly before them, its usual clamor hushed by the elevation. She asked me something, Logan said suddenly. Petra? He nodded. What did she ask? She wanted to know if I was going to be around forever. Irene's hand tightened around her mug. What did you say? I told her I can't predict forever, but that I'm not going anywhere unless she tells me to leave. She glanced sideways at him. And what if I ask you to leave? He looked at her without flinching. I'd stay at the door until you opened it again. She shook her head. That's a dangerous answer. It's an honest one. The wind blew softly across the rooftop, and for a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Irene spoke again. She doesn't get attached easily. You should know that. I noticed. Which means you've made a mark already. He didn't smile. He just stared out at the city. I'm not scared of that, he said. I'm scared of losing it. She faced him fully now. You won't, she said. Not if you keep showing up. He turned to her, eyes locked. I've spent years building things, he murmured. This is the first time I've wanted to build a life. Irene stepped closer, her hand resting gently over his heart. It doesn't take a blueprint, she said. Just consistency. He covered her hand with his, and in that quiet exchange they both understood something unspoken. They weren't guessing anymore. They were choosing. Later that afternoon, Petra woke to find both of them still there. Logan helped her organize her bookshelf while Irene cooked in the kitchen. Nothing elaborate, just something warm and homemade, the kind of meal that fills the air with purpose. And when dinner was done and Petra was tucked back in with a bedtime story, Irene and Logan sat once more in the dim glow of the living room. No declarations, no expectations, just two people who had finally found something solid, something worth returning to. Again and again, rain tapped gently on the windows the next morning. Irene stood in the kitchen in soft pajamas, stirring oatmeal on the stove. Petra was still asleep, curled under her favorite blanket. The quiet hum of morning wrapped around the apartment like a gentle cocoon. Logan appeared without a sound. His hair was slightly damp. He wore a fitted white t-shirt and charcoal joggers. No shoes, no phone, just him. "Smells good," he said. "It's simple. I like simple." She turned and handed him a cup of coffee. Their fingers brushed. He didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned in and kissed her cheek, unhurried, certain. "Sleep well?" she asked. "With you near?" He nodded. "Best night in months." She smiled. "I didn't snore, did I?" "Not once." He sipped his coffee while watching her move. "You always this quiet in the morning?" she asked. "Only when I want the moment to last." She turned to face him fully. "You're learning how to be present. I'm learning how not to ruin good things." Her eyes softened. "You're not ruining anything, Logan." "Not yet," he said. "But I've never had something this gentle. I don't want to lose it by mishandling it." "You're not—" He exhaled, tension sliding off his shoulders. They stood there, holding each other's gaze until a soft voice interrupted them. "Mom?" Petra stood in the hallway, rubbing her eyes. "Hey, baby," Irene said, crouching. Petra padded forward and wrapped her arms around her mother. Then she looked up at Logan. "Can we go somewhere today?" "Where do you want to go?" he asked. She thought for a moment. "Somewhere fun, with books and snacks." He smiled. "Sounds like a bookstore with a cafe." She grinned. "That's exactly what I meant." Irene raised an eyebrow. "You're bribing her with cookies now?" "She deserves joy," he replied. "So do you." They went to a quiet bookstore tucked between two high-rise buildings downtown. Inside, Petra wandered off to the children's section while Irene and Logan sat at a small table with 2 mugs of tea. Irene watched her daughter move from shelf to shelf, gently pulling. Down books, inspecting the covers, then replacing them carefully. "She's been through more than most adults," she said. "I can see it," Logan replied. "But she doesn't lead with her pain. No, she leads with curiosity. That's how I know she's still whole." He studied Irene for a long moment. "You did that." She did it herself. "I just stood beside her." "Still," he said. "She didn't get her resilience from the air." Irene looked down at her tea. Then, without lifting her gaze, asked, "Do you still feel like this is temporary?" "No." "Then, what is it?" He answered without hesitation. "It's the start." "The start of what?" "Whatever you want it to be." She looked up. And what she saw in his eyes wasn't the excitement of newness. It was readiness, for commitment, for weight, for real life. Before she could respond, Petra returned with 2 books and a chocolate chip muffin. "One for me," she said, holding up a picture book. "One for you," she added, handing Logan a novel about astronauts. He looked at it. "This is a very specific choice. You look like someone who wants to go to space." He chuckled. "I think I already did." She tilted her head. "Huh?" "Nothing," he said, tousling her curls. "It's perfect." Petra climbed into his lap without hesitation. Irene watched, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was observing something that might be taken from her. She felt like she was witnessing something settling, rooting, becoming. That evening, after dinner, Petra fell asleep on the couch with her book clutched to her chest. Logan carried her to bed without needing to be asked. Irene followed, standing quietly at the doorway as he tucked her in and pulled the blanket to her chin. He didn't say anything, but he stood there a long time, just watching her breathe. Then he turned and joined Irene in the hallway. "You didn't say goodnight," she said softly. "I was afraid I wouldn't be able to leave." She reached for his hand. "You don't have to." They moved to the balcony again. this time wrapped in a shared silence that wasn't heavy. It was full. He looked at her. She looked at him. And there was no fear left in either of them. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That this isn't just about the two of us anymore. It hasn't been for a while." He stepped closer. "She asked me a question last week." Irene raised an eyebrow. "What did she ask?" "She asked if she could call me something else." Her voice dropped. "What did you say?" "I told her it was up to you." Irene's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. Instead, she said she wouldn't ask if she didn't feel it. "And you?" She stepped even closer. "I've never felt more certain." He placed his hand gently on her face. And then, with the city watching in silence, he kissed her again. Not like a man chasing a moment, but like a man claiming a future. The photo was taken from across the street. Logan in his charcoal overcoat, hand gently resting on Petra's back as she skipped beside him. Irene trailed just behind, smiling faintly, holding a paper bag of pastries. The moment was private, quiet, but the lens didn't care. By the next morning, it was everywhere. Front pages, business blogs, entertainment sites, speculation headlines, reclusive billionaire spotted with mystery woman and child. Logan Vale's secret family. Tech titan's domestic detour. Who is she? The story spiraled before Irene even saw it. She was pouring cereal when her phone buzzed with a dozen messages from colleagues she hadn't spoken to in months. She read the first one and dropped the spoon. Petra looked up. "What's wrong?" Irene didn't answer. She walked to the living room, turned on the television, and there it was. Her face, frozen mid-laugh, stretched across the screen next to Logan's profile. The headline flashed again. She muted the volume. The image alone was loud enough. Petra stood at the edge of the hallway, confused. "Why is your picture on TV?" Irene moved quickly, blocking the view. "Sweetheart, go finish breakfast, okay?" Petra obeyed, but not without a glance over her shoulder. Irene reached for her phone and called Logan. He picked up immediately. "You saw it," she said flatly. "Yes. And I'm already handling it." "Handling what?" Her voice tightened. "That people are calling me a gold digger? That tabloids are dissecting my clothes, my job, my motherhood?" He didn't answer. Her chest rose and fell. "I didn't ask for this. I know you didn't. I just wanted to protect her, not parade her." "Irene," he said quietly, "come upstairs." "I'm not, please." She hesitated, then hung up. The elevator opened directly into his penthouse. He stood near the window, phone in one hand, a document in the other. An assistant hovered in the background, whispering into an earpiece. When he saw her, he dismissed the assistant with a quick nod. "I had a media team draft a response," he said. "I don't want to be part of your damage control." He stepped forward. "This isn't about peer, isn't it?" "No, because it looks like I'm a headline now." "You were a headline the moment you trusted me," he said. Her eyes flashed. "That's not fair." "No, it's not," he agreed. "But it's the truth." She walked past him to the window. The view was blinding. Too high, too detached. He followed her, slow and cautious. "I should have warned you," he said. "Yes, I should have protected you." "You didn't even give me a choice," she snapped. "You swept me into your world without explaining the cost. I thought I could shield you. You can't." Silence. He took a breath. "Then let me stand beside you." She turned to him, voice low but steady. "Why? So I don't embarrass your brand?" His jaw tightened. "You think that's what this is about?" "I don't know, Logan. You've spent a decade building a public image so clean no one even knows what you sound like. And now I'm ruining that?" She didn't answer, because she couldn't tell if he meant it as a question or a confession. Finally, he stepped closer, closing the distance. "You think I'm ashamed of you? I think the world thinks I'm disposable. Then let's prove them wrong." She stared at him, unmoving, and he added, "Let me introduce Petra as mine." The words landed like a thunderclap. "You want to do what?" "I want to make it official. You don't even know if she wants that." "She already does," he said softly. "You heard her." Irene's voice dropped. "But what about us?" He didn't flinch. "I want that official too." She stepped back. "Logan, you don't have to fix this with grand gestures." "I'm not fixing anything," he said. "I'm claiming what's already mine." Tears burned at her eyes, but she held them in. I need to think. He nodded. I'll wait. She returned to the apartment, trying to move through the day as though it hadn't changed. But the calls kept coming. The texts. The emails. Even some from hospital administrators. Her privacy was bleeding out in real time. Petra asked questions she couldn't answer. By evening, Irene sat on the couch exhausted. Then the television changed again. Breaking news. A press conference. She stared at the screen. Logan stood at a podium in a tailored suit, no tie, sleeves rolled slightly, hands braced on the sides like he wasn't reading from a script. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted his name, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he looked straight into the lens. For the past week, the media has speculated about a woman and child photographed beside me. He paused. That woman's name is Irene Castillo. She is not a mystery. She is the most remarkable person I've ever known. The room went still. He continued, voice steady. The child's name is Petra. She is brilliant, brave, and yes, she is mine. The reporters exploded. He raised a hand to calm them. I have never made my personal life public, but I will not allow the woman I love, or her daughter, to be dissected by strangers without context. Love. He said it again. I love Irene Castillo, and I intend to spend the rest of my life proving that love publicly. The screen froze on his face, calm, unapologetic. Irene sat frozen, mouth parted slightly. Petra peeked over the couch arm. Mom? Irene looked at her slowly. Petra crawled up beside her and asked, Can I call him Dad now? Irene blinked fast. She nodded and held her daughter tight. Because in a single moment, with a single choice, Logan Vale changed all of their lives. The knock at the door came just after sunrise. Irene was already awake. She hadn't slept much. She opened the door slowly, not surprised to see him standing there. Logan, in jeans and a navy long-sleeve shirt, no assistants, no security. Just him. He held a thermos in one hand and a small paper bag in the other. I figured you didn't sleep, he said. You figured right. He held out the coffee. She took it. The bag held 2 croissants, still warm. Petra's still asleep, she murmured. Good. She needs it. They stood there a moment. Then she stepped aside and let him in. The living room felt smaller than usual. Or maybe it was just quieter. He sat across from her, elbows resting on his knees, hands folded. She remained on the couch, legs curled under her. I watched it, she said softly. I know. You said it, out loud, on every network. I meant every word. She stared into the thermos. That kind of attention. It doesn't just fade. I'm not trying to make it fade. I'm trying to redirect it. She looked up sharply. To what? To the truth. You realize the internet isn't going to suddenly say, oh, never mind, she's not after his money. I don't need them to, he said. I need you to know that I won't let their version be the one that wins. Her voice lowered. It hurts, Logan. He nodded once. I know. She swallowed. I didn't ask for this life, but I did, he said, and I invited you into it. That means I take the hit with you. She looked at him, lips pressed together. He leaned forward slightly. You don't have to perform or defend yourself or prove anything. You're not a headline. You're not a story. You're not an accessory. She blinked hard. You're not what they write, he said. You're what I see. She lowered her gaze. And what do you see? He stood, walked over to the... You're not what they write, he said. You're what I see. She lowered her gaze. And what do you see? He stood, walked over to the couch and sat beside her. You, the woman who fights for her daughter, who doesn't beg for help, who apologizes for falling asleep after 48 hours of exhaustion. She managed a breath. I was mortified. I was in awe. Silence fell between them. Then he said, They don't define you. Neither does what you've been through. She leaned her head back, staring at the ceiling. I wish it didn't feel like they still do. He touched her hand. Let me carry some of it. Her fingers laced with his instinctively. I've carried it alone for so long. You don't have to anymore. She turned toward him. Petra asked again this morning, she whispered. What did she ask? If we were a family now. He didn't react right away. Then, gently, what did you tell her? I said, I think we're becoming one. His hand tightened around hers. That's what I want too. She blinked. Are you sure? Yes. You're not just reacting to pressure? No. She sat with that, then said, You didn't blink when she asked to call you Dad. I waited my whole life for someone to ask me that. The words hung in the air, raw and open. She leaned into him, pressing her head against his shoulder. They stayed like that, quiet and close. Later that afternoon, they visited Logan's private office. Irene had never been there. The building was sleek but discreet. No logos, just high security and controlled access. Inside, the space was minimalist. White walls, soft leather furniture, tall glass panels overlooking the city. He introduced her to no one. They walked straight to the conference room where a small group already waited, his legal team and a woman in a plum-colored suit. This is Clara, Logan said. Family law. Irene turned sharply. Why is family law here? He motioned toward the seat across from him. I want to make things official. She hesitated, lowering herself slowly into the chair. I don't understand. I'm not asking you to marry me. Not yet. Her heartbeat stuttered. But I am asking for your permission to become Petra's legal guardian. She froze. Clara explained softly, we can establish a guardianship agreement that reflects shared custody in all medical, educational, and security decisions. It won't override maternal rights. It simply adds legal authority to support you both. Irene looked at Logan. You want your name on her file? I want it on every file, he said. Not because I need ownership, but because if something ever happened to you, I don't want to be the stranger she has to explain herself to. Emotion swelled in her throat. You've thought about that? I think about it every day. Tears formed in her eyes before she could stop them. She nodded once. That's a yes? She whispered, yes. Back at the apartment, Petra stood by the window, drawing stars on the glass with her finger. When Irene knelt beside her, she asked, Are we okay now? Irene wrapped her arms around her. Better than okay. Petra's voice was quiet. He's not going anywhere, right? Irene kissed her hair. No, baby. He's staying. Logan stepped into the room, holding a folder. Petra turned to him. He crouched down. I brought something. She took the folder, opened it slowly, and found a drawing inside. 3 stick figures, one tall, one medium, one small, all holding hands. Above them, a little speech bubble from the smallest one. It read, My family. Petra looked up at him. You drew this? I tried. She stared at the paper, then hugged him without a word. And for the second time in a week, Logan Vale cried, not out of pain, but because the thing he thought he'd never have was now his, to protect. The media stage was already set when they arrived. A deep blue curtain hung behind the polished podium. A row of spotlights was carefully angled. Rows of seats had filled quickly with journalists, influencers, and corporate executives. Every major outlet had sent someone. Everyone wanted to hear what Logan Vale would say next. But this time, he wouldn't be standing alone. Backstage, Irene stood beside him, heart racing. Her hand clutched Petra's as cameras flashed just beyond the curtain. You don't have to do this, she said, voice quiet but firm. I do, Logan replied, adjusting the cuffs of his black shirt. For both of you. She glanced down at Petra, who stood calmly between them, holding her stuffed Arctic fox under one arm. Are you nervous? Irene asked her daughter. Petra grinned. Nope. I look fancy. She did. A pale pink dress, braided hair, new shoes. Logan knelt beside her, eye level. You remember what we talked about? Petra nodded. Smile. Be myself. Don't wave too much. Perfect. He stood, met Irene's eyes. Ready? She drew in a breath and nodded. As they stepped onto the stage, a hush fell over the crowd. Logan moved to the podium first. He didn't speak right away. He placed both hands on the edges, anchoring himself. No notes, no script. Only truth. I've spent most of my life avoiding the spotlight, he began, even while standing in it. He glanced over his shoulder. Irene and Petra stood to the side, just enough to be seen but not exposed. But there are moments, he continued, where privacy becomes secondary to clarity. He paused, scanning the room. There's been speculation about my relationship with Irene Castillo and her daughter Petra. I could ignore it. I could hide. But that's not who I want to be anymore. A flicker of shudders sounded across the room. I love them, he said. That's the truth. I love Irene for her strength, her honesty, and her resilience. I love Petra for her brilliance, her courage, and the way she has changed what I thought I understood about fatherhood. A wave of murmurs swept through the audience. He raised a hand. I didn't plan this part of my life. I didn't chase it. But when it appeared, I knew it was real. He motioned toward them. Irene stepped forward, one hand gently resting on Petra's back. The girl beamed. Logan continued. Today, we're launching the Petra Foundation, an initiative aimed at supporting single mothers in healthcare professions. It will offer housing, scholarships, and emergency medical grants. He looked at Irene. This foundation bears her daughter's name, but it reflects her fight. Irene's eyes filled, but she didn't look away. Logan turned back to the cameras. This is the family I chose, not out of guilt, not for image, but because they're the only thing I've ever built that feels permanent. A pause. Then, without hesitation, he reached back, took Petra's hand, and gently guided her forward. Petra asked me recently if she could call me something new. Reporters leaned forward. I told her it was up to her. He looked down at the girl. She looked up at him. Then into the crowd. My name is Petra, she said loudly. And this is my dad. The room burst into a collective sound. Gasps, sniffles, camera clicks. Logan knelt beside her again, placing one hand on her shoulder. The press couldn't stop taking photos. And yet none of those photos would ever fully capture the stillness in that moment. The quiet courage. The wholeness. After the conference, they returned to the car. Irene sat quietly, holding Petra's hand while the driver navigated through the crowds outside. Logan removed his blazer, loosened his collar, and turned to face them. You were incredible, he told Petra. She shrugged. I just said the truth. Irene reached for his hand. He took it without hesitation. Outside, a sea of reporters and camera crews scrambled for more angles, but none of them mattered. Inside the car, it was just them. 3 people who had rewritten their story, not through force or spectacle, but by standing still in the middle of the noise, and not flinching. That evening, Logan's penthouse was quiet. He cooked, not well, but intentionally. Simple pasta, garlic bread, and a bowl of berries Petra had requested. They ate on the floor. No formal table, no silverware rules. Just food, warmth, and the glow of something lasting. Petra fell asleep on the rug, wrapped in a blanket, fox still in hand. Irene cleaned the plates while Logan tidied the counter. When he reached for the last glass, she stopped him. I have something to say. He faced her. She drew in a breath. I've spent my whole life apologizing for needing help. I've noticed, but with you, I never had to ask. You were just there. He stepped closer. I will always be there. I know. She placed her hand on his chest. You asked me once what I saw when I looked at you. He nodded. She smiled. I see the man I want to grow old beside. He took her hand, lifted it to his lips, and kissed it slowly, then said the words without fear. I see the woman I'll never let go of. The air was crisp at the top of the tower. It was just past dusk, and Manhattan glittered below like a sea of stars. The rooftop had been cleared. No press, no noise, no staff. Just silence and sky. Logan stood near the edge, dressed in a deep navy coat, his hands in his pockets. The wind tugged gently at his collar. Behind him, soft string lights lined the perimeter. A quiet piano track played from hidden speakers. No lyrics, just melody. Irene arrived with Petra, led by Clara, Logan's longtime assistant. The moment she stepped onto the rooftop, her breath caught. Logan, she whispered. He turned. His eyes found hers instantly. No speech, no dramatic pause, just a steady walk forward until he reached them. Petra stood between them, her eyes wide, taking in the flowers arranged, in simple rows on the small table in the corner, set for 3. You didn't have to do all this, Irene said softly. I did, Logan replied, because this isn't about a grand gesture. It's about marking something sacred. Petra clutched her mom's hand. Can I give it to her now? Logan nodded. Petra reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. She handed it to Irene. I was supposed to wait, but I don't want to. Irene slowly opened it. Inside sat a ring, classic, no excess, a round diamond, set in gold, elegant. Timeless. She looked up, stunned. Logan's voice was low but unwavering. I wasn't going to ask in front of the world. I didn't want to ask at a gala or under the pressure of flashing lights. She stared at him. He stepped closer. I'm asking you here, with your daughter beside you, our daughter now, in quiet, in truth. Her eyes glistened. Logan took the box from her trembling fingers, pulled the ring free, and knelt down. Irene Castillo, you changed everything about how I see the world. You taught me how to feel again. You've given Petra safety, love, and joy, and you've given me something no one ever has, clarity. He held up the ring. I want to build a life that feels like this moment, real, present, sacred. Will you marry me? She blinked, barely able to find her voice. Petra touched her arm. Say yes, Mom. Irene let out a quiet laugh through her tears. Yes, she whispered. Then stronger. Yes, I'll marry you. Logan exhaled, relief flooding his expression. He stood, slid the ring gently onto her finger, then cupped her face and kissed. Her, slow and full, the city lights blinking behind them like distant applause. Petra wrapped her arms around both of them, laughing into their coats. For the first time, the rooftop wasn't cold. It felt like home. They stayed up there long after the table had been cleared. Petra eventually fell asleep on a chaise lounge, a wool blanket tucked around her. Logan sat beside Irene, one hand resting on her knee, the other clasping hers. She leaned her head against his shoulder. You really meant for it to be just us, she murmured. I wanted this moment to be ours, not content, not noise. She smiled. Thank you. You don't have to thank me for doing what I should have done the first moment I saw you. She shifted slightly, looking at him. What was that? Fall in love. He kissed her temple. She exhaled into his chest. I don't know what kind of husband I'll be, he said quietly. I've never seen it done right. You'll learn. I just want to be someone who shows up. You already are. He pressed his forehead against hers. And in that simple closeness, nothing else mattered. Not the headlines, not the past, not the doubt, only the future. And the family they were already building together. The following morning, the apartment buzzed with a quiet kind of energy. There was no press outside, no reporters on rooftops, no scheduled interviews, just a sense of life gently unfolding inside the four walls that had once felt borrowed, but now felt earned. Logan stood at the kitchen island, sleeves rolled, hair slightly damp, whisking eggs, with a kind of concentration that suggested he hadn't done this very often. Irene sat at the table, barefoot, coffee in hand, watching him with a soft smile. I didn't think you cooked. I don't. That explains the flour on your elbow. He glanced down and smirked. I got carried away trying to make pancakes. How'd that go? They looked like creative interpretations of circles. She chuckled and took a sip of her coffee. Petra came skipping in moments later, wearing a robe 2 sizes too big and socks that didn't match. She climbed into the chair beside her mother and yawned. I dreamed about stars, she said. What kind? Irene asked. Bright ones. They were dancing. Logan plated scrambled eggs with careful precision and set the plate in front of Petra. I hope they danced you into a deep sleep, he said. They did. One of them winked at me. He placed a second plate in front of Irene and then sat down beside them with his own. There were no speeches, no phones, no discussions about board meetings or foundations, just breakfast and warmth. Later that day, Logan returned to Vale Industries headquarters for the first time since the press conference. The executive floor was busier than usual, but silent when he entered. His assistant, Jamal, stood from behind his desk. Everyone's waiting. Logan nodded. Let's not keep them. The boardroom was full. 12 chairs, polished wood, floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the skyline. Logan entered, placed his phone on the table, and remained standing. I know you've all seen the headlines, he began, so I won't rehash them. Some of the directors exchanged glances. I'm not here to ask for your approval. I'm here to confirm the direction of this company, one that reflects not just profit but purpose. He scanned the room. I built this company in my own image, cold, quiet, controlled. But that image has changed. I've changed. No one moved. Then he added, not because of a PR strategy, but because someone reminded me what it means to feel like a person again. A pause. She made me human. A few board members lowered their eyes. He continued, I'm restructuring portions of our philanthropy division, expanding outreach to underserved medical workers and their families. I'm also taking on fewer public events and delegating day-to-day operations to the people in this room I trust. Jamal passed out a folder to each person at the table. Inside, details of the Petra Foundation's joint collaboration with Vale Industries. "You're not losing me," Logan said. "You're getting the best version of me." He sat. The silence lingered for several seconds. Then one of the older directors, Ms. Rowland, spoke first. "She must be extraordinary." "She is," Rowland nodded slowly. "Then it's about time." No objections followed. That evening, Irene stepped into Logan's private office for the first time. He stood behind his desk, sleeves rolled again, tie draped over the back of a chair. She looked around. Bookshelves lined with first editions, models of spacecraft and vintage cameras. A framed photo of Petra tucked neatly beside a small figurine Irene didn't recognize. "You've hidden this place from me," she said. "I wasn't ready to show it." "Why now?" "Because I want you to see all of me, not just the part that looks good in candlelight." She walked toward the desk and ran her fingers along the edge. "I've been in so many rooms where I didn't belong," she said. "You belong in this one." She looked at him. "You're sure?" He crossed to her, pulling her gently into his arms. "I'm sure of two things," he said quietly. "You saved me from a life I didn't know was starving me. And the second, you don't owe me anything for it." She rested her head against his chest. "I'm not trying to fix you, Logan. I know. I just want to walk beside you." He held her tighter. "Then don't let go." "I wasn't planning to." Later, as they walked Petra home from her science club meeting, Irene noticed something different. Not about Logan, about Petra. She was more animated. Her steps lighter, her laughter louder. When they reached the lobby of the building, Petra tugged at Irene's coat. "Mom?" "Yes? Can I ask you something kind of important?" Irene knelt. "Always. Are we still just visitors in his world?" Irene blinked. "No," she said gently. "We're home." Petra smiled, then reached for Logan's hand. He took it without hesitation. They walked into the elevator together, three people with no shared blood, but one shared bond. Stronger than history, stronger than headlines, and finally, unchallenged by fear. No velvet aisle, no orchestra, no media list. Just a Tuesday afternoon, a quiet chapel on the Upper East Side, and the kind of silence that felt reverent, not hollow. Logan stood at the altar, no tuxedo, just a tailored gray suit and an open-collar shirt. His hands were steady, but his heart beat with a rhythm that defied even his most chaotic boardroom moments. He had been to Gallus. He had survived billion-dollar acquisitions, but nothing made him feel more exposed, more real than the weight of the next few minutes. The doors opened, and everything else disappeared. Irene entered alone. No one gave her away. She walked herself down the aisle, chin high, eyes locked on him. She wore a dress that moved like it had been sewn from breath, cream silk, sleeveless, no train. Her curls were tucked behind one ear, the other wild and free. In her hand, she carried nothing. She didn't need flowers. She had her story, and it had led her here. The officiant was an old family friend of Irene's, retired, soft-spoken, gentle in tone. They stood together before him, Logan and Irene, hands linked. Only Petra and Clara sat in the pews. No more than that. No decorations, no choir, just presence. The officiant began. "We are here not to witness the joining of two perfect people, but to celebrate. Two willing hearts choosing each other, fully, humbly, and without reservation." Logan's eyes never left Irene. He didn't blink, didn't shift. When it was time to speak, he did. "I used to believe I was complete alone. I wasn't. I was surviving. You," he took a breath, "you brought me back to life. You reminded me that strength isn't silence, and that love, real love, isn't control. It's surrender." Irene's lips trembled, but she nodded softly. When it was her turn, she whispered, "I've carried so much alone. I built walls because I didn't know anyone would stay long enough to see past them, but you stood. You waited. You listened. You didn't just love the version of me that smiles. You loved the one that didn't know how." Logan's jaw tightened. Petra wiped a tear from her cheek. The officiant smiled. "Do you, Logan Vale, choose Irene Castillo to be your wife, your partner, your heart's home, through clarity and chaos, comfort and change?" I do, he said, instantly. And do you, Irene Castillo, choose Logan Vale to be your husband, your constant, your equal, through joy and through fire? I do. Then by the truth of your words and the vow of your lives, I now pronounce you partners in everything that matters. No fanfare, no applause, just breath and the kiss. A kiss not rushed, not chased. A kiss that said, this is it. This is the life we built. They stepped out of the chapel into the cool air, hand in hand. A black car waited at the curb. Logan opened the door for both Irene and Petra. As they slid inside, Petra leaned forward from the back seat and placed something in Logan's pocket. He reached in and pulled out a folded note. In blocky handwriting it read, Dad, I knew you were hers since the night you let me sleep on your lap. Love, P. Logan pressed the paper to his chest. Irene reached for his hand and held it tightly as the car pulled away. They didn't need a reception. They didn't need champagne toasts or choreographed dances. What they had was enough. And more than that, it was quiet, solid, sacred. Back at the penthouse, Logan cooked again. Petra helped. She wore a white dress of her own, one she'd picked out from a boutique. Weeks earlier, just in case they ever became a family, she'd said. They sat on the balcony that night. No shoes, no candles. Irene laid her head on Logan's shoulder as Petra snuggled into her lap. Above them, the sky stretched wide and soft. I never thought this would be my life, Irene said. Neither did I, Logan murmured. Petra whispered, I did. They both turned toward her. I dreamed it before I ever met him. Logan brushed her cheek. You dreamed me? I dreamed someone who would see her. Logan looked at Irene. I do. And as the wind moved around them, carrying no sound but breath and warmth, they stayed there, together, exactly as they were. Family, this is Dr. Phillips. If you're still with me right now, it means this story has touched something deep inside you. Don't keep that feeling to yourself. Let it shine. Take a moment to hit that like button so we know you're here and so YouTube can share this story with others who need its light. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe and join our Love and Twilight family, where every story is more than words. It's a journey of hope, healing, and love. Your support keeps these stories alive, and your comments make this space a true community. The plane touched down on a small strip carved into the emerald edge of the island. No control tower, no crowds, no cameras, just ocean on all sides, turquoise and endless. As the door opened, Logan stepped out first and inhaled the air, thick with salt, warm with promise. Irene followed, barefoot already, her heels tucked into her bag. Her sundress fluttered at her knees. She reached back to help Petra step onto the tarmac. But Petra wasn't here this time. This trip wasn't for family. It was for them. Just love. The villa stood alone on the western curve of the island, all white, stone and dark wood, shaded by palm trees and open to the sea breeze. There were no security details, no personal assistants hovering with schedules, no itinerary. Only one rule. Unplug from everything. Plug into each other. The silence was different here. It didn't echo. It didn't press. It invited. Irene wandered the open-plan interior, running her hands along the curved walls. Bowls of fresh fruit on the table. Linen curtains billowing like breath. A king-size canopy bed facing the horizon with no television in sight. She turned to find Logan watching her from the doorway. His shirt was halfway unbuttoned already. His smile was easy, real. This place, she said quietly. I bought it 2 years ago. She blinked. You own this? I never used it. Why not? He stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Didn't know who to bring. That evening, they made dinner together. No chef, no five-star service, just Irene chopping fresh peppers while Logan grilled fish over an open flame. They laughed at how unevenly she sliced the cucumbers and how seriously he took basting with lime. After the meal, they carried their plates to the deck and ate with their fingers. She fed him pieces of mango, juice dripping onto his wrist. He licked it off slowly. You're dangerous when you smile like that, she murmured. He leaned in, brushing her knee with his fingertips. I've barely started. They didn't go inside right away. They stayed out on the deck until the sun sank and the sky went violet, until the stars scattered like sparks, and the only light left was the glow of oil lanterns. Irene lay back on the outdoor lounger, Logan beside her. Do you miss the noise? she asked. No, not even a little. He turned his head toward her. I spent my life building walls made of noise. I thought success was sound. This is peace. She smiled and whispered, then let's not waste it. That night, they explored the villa slowly, not like tourists discovering rooms, but like lovers rediscovering each other. Logan moved through the candlelit bedroom with intention, not rush. He poured her a glass of cold wine and pressed it into her palm with a kiss to her wrist. She undressed in silence, letting the fabric fall from her shoulders in slow, deliberate layers. He didn't reach for her immediately. He watched, not with hunger, with reverence. And when they did come together, skin on skin, breath on breath, there was no urgency, only surrender. He kissed her like she was both miracle and home. She traced his jaw, his chest, his scars. He worshipped the curve of her hip, the line of her spine, the softness behind her knee. No part of her body went unnoticed. No part of his soul stayed untouched. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Everything that mattered was said in the way she whispered his name into his shoulder and the way he held her after, not to possess her, but to protect the quiet they had made. The next morning, the sun crept through the wide-open shutters, painting the sheets in gold. Irene stirred first, her hand searching across the bed for him. He wasn't there. She sat up, pulling the sheet around her, and wandered barefoot to the kitchen. Logan stood at the island, shirtless, making coffee. He didn't turn. He just said, "It's ready." She smiled. "You've never looked more relaxed. I feel like a man without a kingdom." "You have one," she said. "You're just not ruling with fists anymore." He poured her a cup and handed it over. They sipped in silence. Outside, the ocean rolled, and the birds announced another sunrise. He pulled her close by the waist, forehead resting against hers. "I don't know how to go back. Maybe we don't." "You mean, stay here?" "I mean, live like this." He nodded slowly, not as a promise, but as a beginning. That afternoon, they swam naked in the lagoon behind the villa. The water was warm, the sand soft beneath their feet. She splashed him. He lifted her effortlessly, spinning her until they collapsed into the water laughing. Later, they floated on their backs, side by side, fingers laced. The sun above them, the future ahead, and no one watching. The sky above the island stretched like ink, speckled with constellations that pulsed in slow rhythm. The villa behind them glowed faintly, its lanterns dimmed, its doors open to the ocean's breath. They dragged a mattress out onto the wooden deck and layered it with soft linens, pillows, and a single blanket. Irene laid on her side, cheek resting on her palm, watching. Logan beside her as he stared upward, his chest bare, his breathing even, his eyes locked on something only he could see. For a long while, neither of them spoke. The night didn't demand words, but she reached out anyway, tracing her finger from his collarbone to the curve of his shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" she asked gently. He didn't answer right away. She waited. Eventually his voice came low, rasped. "When I was 9, my mother left." Her hand stilled on his skin. "She said it was temporary. She'd found a program, some kind of artist residency. Said she needed space to breathe. She never came back." Irene shifted closer. Logan's gaze didn't move from the stars. "My father stopped talking for a year. He'd leave the house before sunrise and come back after I was asleep. I remember counting days like other kids counted candy." Irene rested her hand on his chest, right over his heart. Logan continued, slower now. "I learned early that love doesn't always mean stay, that people can swear something with their whole chest and still walk away. I stopped expecting anyone to hold the line." She didn't interrupt. "I figured if I could build something unshakable, money, power, reputation, then maybe no one would leave. Not because they loved me, but because they needed me." He turned his head then, finally meeting her eyes. "But you didn't need me," she whispered. "I didn't want to, and that scared me more than anything." He exhaled. "I hated how you made me feel, vulnerable, seen, and I kept trying to stuff that down. Control you, intimidate you, anything to keep from letting you matter." Irene's voice broke softly. "But I did. You still do." His hand reached for hers, fingers intertwining. "I think I was so used to being abandoned I didn't know how to believe you were real. And even when I did, I waited for you to run." "I almost did," she admitted. "I wouldn't have blamed you. But I didn't," she added, firmer now. "I didn't run." He nodded. Silence returned, but it wasn't empty. It was full of everything they weren't saying, everything they had already survived. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. The stars above them stayed. Irene curled into his side, her head resting just beneath his chin. "Do you ever still feel lonely?" she asked. "Yes," he said without hesitation, "but it's different now." "How?" "Before, loneliness felt like drowning, like I was screaming underwater and no one noticed. And now it's just quiet. And I know the silence won't swallow me anymore." She kissed his chest. "I'm here," she whispered. "I know." A warm breeze lifted the edge of the blanket. Irene pulled it over them again, tucking it around their hips. Logan's fingers brushed over her back slowly, up and down in silent rhythm. "I hated therapy," he said. That caught her off guard. "I used to sit there, arms crossed, saying what I thought they wanted to hear. I never told them the truth. Why? Because I didn't want anyone trying to fix me. I thought I was built this way, closed off, calculated, cold. You weren't cold. I was afraid. I still am, sometimes." Irene's breath caught. "Of what?" "Of losing you, of failing Petra, of waking up one day and realizing I've created a perfect life on the outside, but nothing real inside." She sat up slightly, looking at him. "You built something real, not just for us, for yourself. Sometimes it doesn't feel that way. Then let me remind you." She leaned down and kissed him, not hungrily, not to claim, but to comfort. Her lips moved with care, her hands framing his jaw. He responded slowly, rising to meet her with gentleness, his hands cradling her waist. Their bodies shifted beneath the blanket. She climbed over him, never breaking the kiss, her curls falling around their faces like a veil. He whispered her name. She smiled into his mouth. Every motion that followed was deliberate, measured, holy. They moved together in rhythm with the ocean beyond the deck. No pressure, no urgency, just presence, just truth. His hands held her carefully. Her body welcomed him fully. And when they reached their crescendo, it wasn't loud. It wasn't chaotic. It was quiet. So quiet it could only be love. After, Irene rested her head on his chest again. Logan stared up at the sky, arms around her, his breathing finally steady. "I never told anyone all that," he said softly. "You did tonight. Because with you, it doesn't feel like a confession. It feels like release." She closed her eyes. He kissed her forehead. And for the first time in decades, Logan Vale fell asleep under the stars. Not alone, not afraid, but full, whole, and finally, free. The fire pit glowed low on the sand. Crickets sang softly from the tree line. Waves rolled calmly, and above them, the moon began its slow rise, half-shadowed, silver-edged. Irene sat cross-legged on the beach blanket, a light shawl over her shoulders, her knees drawn to her chest. Logan sat beside her, arms braced behind him, legs stretched out, listening. Not as a lover, but as someone who'd finally learned how to be present. Her voice was quiet, but it didn't waver. "When I was 5, my dad tucked me into bed every night with stories about places he'd never been," she began. "Paris, Venice, Tokyo. Cities painted with words. He used to say the world was too big to stay still." Logan turned slightly toward her. "I didn't understand him then. But I get it now." She stared into the flame, its dance reflected in her eyes. "Mom died when I was 8. Breast cancer. Fast. Too fast. One week she was reading to me in the kitchen, and the next, I was at a funeral holding a rose I didn't want to drop." Logan's hand found hers. She gripped it, hard. Dad never recovered. He tried. He really did. But the story stopped. The light went out in him. And in me. She paused. Took a breath. "I used to sit by the window and imagine a different life. One where my mom came back. One where I grew wings and flew away." He didn't speak. He just shifted closer. "I grew up on free lunches, thrift store uniforms, and the idea that dreaming too much was dangerous. But I kept doing it anyway." "What did you dream about?" he asked, softly. Her lips tugged into the smallest smile. "Freedom, a place where no one left, a kitchen with sunlight, a bed that smelled like fresh sheets, laughter that didn't sound borrowed." She glanced sideways. "And sometimes, a man who didn't look at me like I was fragile or broken or someone to rescue, just someone to choose." Logan's jaw tensed, his grip still firm in hers. "I got scholarships, worked 2 jobs, made my way through nursing school. There were nights I cried in hospital lockers because patients flatlined under my care. Days I skipped meals just to cover Petra's first daycare fees. And all that time I told myself, keep going. One day, the story will turn. He looked at her like he was seeing her again, for the first time. You turned it, he said. She shook her head. No, life turned it, and then you happened. He tried to speak, but she placed a finger on his lips. I don't need saving, Logan. I never did. But I needed to be seen, really seen, not for what I could give, not for what I survived, just for who I am. Tears didn't fall. They weren't needed. This wasn't grief. They sat in the silence that followed, letting it settle between them like a blanket. The stars above them shimmered. The ocean pulled and released the shore with steady rhythm. And then, without a word, Logan stood. He reached for her hand. She took it. He led her back to the villa, slowly, deliberately, each step barefoot, each motion unhurried. Inside, he didn't light candles or turn on music. He simply walked her to the bed, pulled back the covers, and waited. She slipped off her shawl. He stepped out of his clothes. They met in the middle. No rush, no performance, no spark to ignite. They didn't need fire tonight. They needed warmth. She climbed onto him gently, her legs straddling his hips, their foreheads pressed together. Their breaths mingled in the quiet space between them. No games, no seduction, just presence. Her hands slid over his chest, anchoring her. His arms wrapped around her back, holding her close. And when they moved, it wasn't with urgency. It was with reverence. They moved not to reach a climax, but to feel everything they'd hidden for years, ache, resilience, longing, grace. She whispered his name like it was a promise. He kissed her shoulder like a prayer. Their eyes stayed open, locked, connected, and when the waves of release did come, they weren't thunderous. They were still, profound, sacred. She collapsed onto him, skin to skin, heart to heart, and for a long time, they didn't speak, didn't shift, didn't escape the moment. Later, she traced idle patterns on his chest, her voice barely a murmur. I've never felt this safe. He kissed her hairline. You won't shut down again? No, I can't afford to. Not with you. Good, she whispered, because I'm not going anywhere. He wrapped both arms around her, pulling the blanket over their bodies as the wind picked up outside. They lay like that for hours, bodies entwined, minds at ease, hearts finally aligned. Morning would come, so would the noise. But tonight, beneath soft sheets and salt-kissed air, Logan and Irene weren't lovers chasing passion. They were two souls who had known the weight of abandonment and the ache of survival. And now, they were each other's refuge. Irene stood barefoot in the bathroom, clutching the small white stick in trembling fingers. Two pink lines stared back at her. She blinked once, then again. Her breath caught somewhere between joy and disbelief. She'd felt it, the heaviness in her chest, the odd flutter in her stomach, the way exhaustion pulled her down even when the sun was shining bright. But seeing it confirmed everything. She was pregnant, again, and this time, not just with hope, with life, with lives. Logan returned to the villa an hour later, sand still dusted on his ankles, sunglasses pushed into his hair, a fresh coconut in one hand and a small orchid in the other. He stopped the moment he saw her. Irene was sitting on the edge of their bed, fingers curled in her lap, eyes glassy. Irene? She looked up, then smiled, soft, radiant, unsteady. His heart flipped. She stood and walked to him slowly. I have something to tell you. He set the coconut and flower aside, nodding. She held out the test. He took it in his hand, looked down, then looked back at her. Silence wrapped around them. He blinked once, then again. She nodded. He breathed in, staggered. You're sure? I took 3. He stared at her, stunned. Then his arms swept around her body, lifting her off the ground. He buried his face into her neck, laughing, breathless. Oh my God. She laughed with him, tears running freely now. There's more, she whispered against his ear. He paused, pulled back just enough to see her face. Her hand slipped into her pocket and revealed a folded ultrasound photo. He took it, opening the crease slowly. Two tiny forms. 2 heartbeats. Twins, he whispered, nearly reverent. She nodded, eyes shining. Twins. That night, he didn't sleep. He lay awake beside her, his hands spread protectively across her belly, though nothing had changed outwardly yet. His mind raced, not with fear, not with pressure, but with awe. He was going to be a father again. Twice over, the man who had once feared love had now created a future pulsing with it. Over the next few days, Logan transformed the villa into something of a makeshift nursery. He sent for books, prenatal chefs, yoga instructors, and whispered to her belly in the early mornings like it was a secret prayer. But what he did most was build. Plans, sketches, blueprints, homes. He commissioned architects to design 3 estates in different cities: Los Angeles, Napa Valley, and Lake Como. Each one crafted with floor-to-ceiling windows, nurseries lined in natural wood, meditation gardens for Irene, and playrooms facing the sunrise. He showed her the models with the pride of a man revealing his legacy. But Irene sat quietly as he explained. She smiled, touched by the effort, but something in her expression stayed still. "Do you not like them?" he asked gently. "They're beautiful, but—" She took a deep breath, eyes soft. "I don't need a mansion, Logan. I don't need lakes or wine cellars or marble tubs. Those things are lovely, but they don't make me feel safe." He waited. She continued. "Home, to me, isn't a place. It's the smell of your shirt on the couch. It's Petra running into the room with crayon on her hands. It's your arms after a long shift." He swallowed. "I know you want to give us the world," she said, "but we already have what matters." He stepped forward. His hand reached for her cheek. "You really feel that?" She nodded. "Every time you look at me like you are right now." Logan didn't argue, didn't try to convince her. Instead, he leaned in and kissed her forehead. "Then wherever we go, we build that." Later, they sat on the deck as the sun fell behind the trees. Petra napped upstairs, and the sea hummed its lullaby beneath the cliffs. Logan rested his hand on her belly again. "I wish I could hear them already." "You will." "I talk to them like they're answering. They are." He smiled, brushing a curl behind her ear. "I don't want to miss anything this time." "You won't. I missed too much before. You didn't know how to be there, but now you do." He nodded. I look at you, and I see what I never thought I deserved. And I look at Petra, and I wonder how I ever lived without her laughter. And now," he exhaled, "2 more." She took his hand and placed it flat against her belly. "They're going to know you, Logan. Not just the CEO, not just the man who buys islands and watches the market, but you, the man who sings to his daughter off-key and makes pancakes at midnight, the man who didn't run from love when it finally came." His throat tightened. "I want to do everything right. You already are." He pulled her close, kissing her shoulder, then resting his forehead against it. "You've changed everything." "No," she whispered. "You changed." That night, the rain came again, but it wasn't a storm. It was soft, cleansing. They sat by the window, Petra between them asleep, her tiny feet over Logan's lap, her curls spilling across Irene's arm. Outside, thunder murmured faintly, but it wasn't menacing. It was lullaby. Logan glanced over at the 2 women in his life, and the 2 still growing inside the one who made him whole. He pressed a palm to her belly and whispered, "Wherever we go, you are my home." It began with alphabet cards and a makeshift chalkboard. Logan had cleared one wing of the villa and turned it into a classroom, sunlit, cozy, walls filled with Petra's drawings taped up like masterpieces. A low white desk faced the window, and beside it, a taller one, where Logan sat daily, pencil behind his ear like a full-time teacher. He didn't hire a tutor. He became one. Every morning, Petra ran into the room with her backpack slung sideways, though she barely carried anything in it. She liked the way it made her feel, important, prepared. "Good morning, Daddy, Professor," she would giggle. Logan would rise, bow theatrically, and open her notebook. They practiced writing letters. "B is for baby," she'd say with a grin, pointing at Irene's growing belly. "Yes," Logan chuckled, "and D is for Daddy's soft heart." In the evenings, when the lessons were done, and Petra had switched to princess pajamas, Logan brought out something new, a telescope. Not just any telescope, but a hand-assembled father-daughter project. Chrome pieces, oak tripod, a dream written in parts. He taught her how to follow instructions, not rush, and tighten bolts slowly. Petra, ever curious, asked questions about constellations, black holes, and whether the moon had stairs. By the fourth evening, it stood tall on the deck, pointed to the heavens. They stared through it together. "That's Jupiter," he whispered. "Can we go there? Maybe someday. But for now, we can just wave." Petra saluted the planet. "Hi, Jupiter. I'm Petra. I live with the best dad in the universe." Logan said nothing, because his voice would have broken. At night, long after Petra fell asleep under her glow-in-the-dark ceiling stars, Logan's rituals turned inward. He'd pull up a small chair beside the bed where Irene rested, her belly full and warm beneath her thin nightgown. He would press both hands gently over the skin, then begin to whisper, "Hey, my little champions, it's me again." Irene would smile, barely opening her eyes, listening. Today Petra wrote her name without help. She was so proud. I nearly cried. Okay, I did cry. "But don't tell her." He would stroke in slow circles as he spoke. "Your sister already loves you. She keeps asking when you'll come out." I told her, "Not yet. Mommy's belly is still your palace." Irene giggled. Logan leaned in. "And you know what? I'm going to teach you everything I know. Business, maybe. Ethics, absolutely. But most importantly, I'll teach you how to love." He kissed the top of Irene's belly. "Because that's what you're made of." Each night, his monologue varied. Sometimes stories from his childhood. Sometimes updates on Petra's schoolwork or the telescope alignment. Sometimes he sang off-key lullabies that made Irene laugh until her ribs ached. And always, without fail, he ended the same way. "You're not even here yet, but I already love you so much it scares me." One morning, Petra waddled into the kitchen holding a piece of folded paper behind her back. Irene sat at the breakfast table, sipping peppermint tea. Logan stood by the sink, squeezing oranges. "Daddy, close your eyes." He did. "No peeking. I swear." She handed him the paper. He unfolded it and found a stick-figure family. 4 large hearts over each head. 2 smaller ones nestled in a circle. He looked up. Petra beamed. "That's me. That's Mommy. That's you. And those," she pointed to the small ones, "are the belly babies." Logan crouched down and scooped her into a hug. "You're going to be the best big sister." She nodded confidently. "I already practiced sharing my cookies." That afternoon, Logan took Irene by surprise. He showed her a second telescope. Smaller, compact, painted white. "For the nursery," he said. "One day, they'll look through it, and we'll tell them, your sister helped build the first one." She touched the lens gently. "You think of everything." "Not everything, but I try." She stepped close, her hands sliding around his waist, head resting against his chest. "Do you know how many men disappear the moment parenting gets real?" "I do." "And do you know how many show up like you have?" "Not enough." She looked up. "You're giving Petra a father, and these twins a foundation. I'm giving myself the life I always dreamed of but never thought I'd deserve." In the final weeks before Irene's due date, Logan slowed the business world to a crawl. Meetings turned virtual. His team took over public appearances. He focused on home. Not the buildings, not the architecture, but the heartbeat. Petra's laughter in the hallway. Irene's glow in the mornings. The sound of 3 lives waiting to bloom. One night, when the rain tapped softly against the glass and Petra had long drifted to sleep, Logan found himself beside Irene again. His hand, steady as always, rested on her belly. But this time, the kick was strong, reflexive. He jerked slightly, eyes wide. That was, "They're getting restless." He placed both palms over her skin. "Are they fighting in there?" She laughed. "They're playing." He leaned in. "Well, listen up, you two. No funny business. Your mom's worked hard carrying you this far. Be nice." Another kick. He grinned. "They're already like you," Irene teased. "And if we're lucky," he whispered, "they'll have your fire and your faith." And for the rest of the night, he stayed there, whispering, dreaming, planning names in his head, imagining lullabies, cradles, tiny socks, and the moment he'd hold them for the first time. Not as a man afraid of love, but as a father overwhelmed by it. The hospital room was hushed except for the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the soft voice of a nurse preparing the incubator. Rain tapped gently against the window. Inside, time slowed. Logan paced in tight circles outside the delivery suite, fingers knotted behind his back. His usual composure, gone, suit jacket draped over a chair, sleeves rolled up, sweat clinging to his forehead. Every second stretched like an hour. Behind the swinging doors, Irene was in labor. Every sound from inside made his heart pound harder. A nurse finally peeked through the door. "She's asking for you." He didn't wait for clearance. He charged in. Irene lay on the bed, her hair damp, strands clinging to her temples. Her hand gripped the railing tightly, knuckles white. Her eyes met his the moment he entered. "I'm here," he said, rushing to her side. She smiled through the pain. "Of course, you are." He kissed her forehead, brushing hair out of her face, and whispered, "You're so strong." The doctor gave instructions. Irene pushed. The room buzzed with energy, nurses calling out stats, a monitor spiking. A cry of exertion, Logan gripping her hand tighter than he realized. "Almost there," the doctor called. Irene screamed, then exhaled. And then, a sound broke through the air. A wail, soft but unmistakable. A baby's cry. Logan's knees nearly buckled. The nurse announced, "It's a boy." Tears sprang to his eyes. Moments later, another wave of effort, another push. Then came the second cry, higher pitched, urgent. "It's a girl." Two voices now, two cries in harmony. Logan dropped to his knees. He couldn't speak, couldn't move. He just wept. The nurse cleaned the babies quickly, swaddled them, and brought them over. "Meet your son and daughter," she said gently. He took the boy first, tiny, red-faced, a full head of dark hair. Then the girl, smaller, fingers curled into tiny fists, eyes already blinking curiously. Logan sat at the edge of the bed, holding both. His chest rose and fell unevenly. "Irene," he whispered, voice breaking. She looked at him with tears in her eyes. "I see them. They're perfect," he said. "They're ours." He pressed his lips to each of their heads. He didn't care that his shirt was stained with tears, or that he couldn't stop shaking. This wasn't just joy. It was something deeper, something seismic. He had touched ambition, touched success, touched wealth, but nothing compared to this. He turned to Petra, who had arrived moments before with her nanny. She stood quietly, staring at the bundles in her father's arms. Logan knelt, lowering the babies to her eye level. "Come meet your brother and sister," he said softly. Petra tiptoed closer, nervous. The nurse helped her onto the bed beside Irene. Logan guided her hand to the boy's cheek. "He's soft," she whispered. Irene smiled. "And she's mine too?" Petra asked, pointing at the girl. "They're all yours," Logan said. "All three of you. You're my whole world." Hours passed in a blur of checkups, swaddling, bottle attempts, and soft lullabies. When night came and nurses rotated out, Logan stayed awake. He sat in a recliner by the window, cradling both newborns, one in each arm. Petra was curled at Irene's side, fast asleep. The hospital lights dimmed to night mode. Outside, the rain had stopped. Inside, everything had changed. He looked down at the sleeping twins, chest tightening with a tenderness so profound it scared him. "You have no idea," he whispered to them, "how long I waited to meet you." He rocked slowly, brushing a finger along their cheeks. "I was scared of love once. I was afraid it made me weak, that it would leave." He looked over at Irene, peaceful, radiant even in exhaustion. "But your mother taught me different." He adjusted their blankets, eyes glassy. "I thought power was in control, but real power is this." He lowered his head, tears dropping silently. "You made me a father," and in that moment, Logan didn't feel like a billionaire, or a CEO, or a man trying to outrun the ghosts of his past. He felt like something new, something sacred, a protector, a nurturer, a witness to life's most miraculous turning point. When morning came, light streamed through the blinds. Irene stirred first, blinking at the sunlight. She saw Logan still awake, still cradling the twins, his head leaned to. The side eyes closed, lips parted in sleep, a soft smile on his face. She didn't wake him. She watched. And in that silence, she fell even more in love. Because this wasn't just the man who flew her across the world, or the man who kissed her spine like poetry. This was the man who held their children all night, afraid to let go. This was the father she prayed for. She finally rose and tiptoed to him, placed a kiss on his head. He stirred, blinking awake, careful not to shift the babies. "Hey," she whispered. "Morning," he said groggily. "You stayed up all night?" I didn't want to miss a second. She knelt beside him, touching his cheek. "You've changed," he exhaled. "I've come home." The auditorium pulsed with quiet energy. Rows of dignitaries, healthcare leaders, journalists, and everyday women filled the hall, many with infants cradled in their arms or toddlers tucked against their sides. Irene stood behind the velvet curtain, palms slightly damp, heart thudding, not from nerves, but from the weight of what was about to unfold. This moment wasn't about her. It was about them. A year ago, she was in a maternity ward with Logan, holding her newborn, twins and whispering prayers of protection into their tiny ears. Now she stood on the brink of launching something greater than a clinic, greater than a brand. A movement. Her movement. The Heartbridge Foundation. She smoothed the sleeve of her soft ivory suit, pressed a hand briefly to her abdomen to ground herself, and exhaled. Behind her, Logan stood silently in the shadows. No spotlight on him. No speech prepared. Just presence. Just pride. She turned to him, and he gave a small nod. No words were needed. He understood. When her name echoed through the microphone, the applause came like thunder. She stepped onto the stage. A massive backdrop behind her displayed the logo, two open palms cradling a heart wrapped in a ribbon that read, "No woman alone, no child unseen." She paused at the podium, scanning the sea of faces. Some women were survivors. Some were just starting their journey. Some were daughters of women who had given up everything just to keep breathing. Irene spoke. "I used to think strength looked like resilience, that if you just kept pushing, you'd eventually arrive at peace. But I was wrong." She let that linger. Strength is asking for help when you've been conditioned to suffer in silence. Heads nodded. Some eyes shimmered. She continued, voice unwavering. "After Petra was born, I returned to work within weeks, not because I wanted to, but because I had no choice. I was a single mother with bills, no family nearby, and a system that failed to ask, 'What do you need?' A quiet murmur rippled through the crowd. I made it through, but just barely, and I swore, if I ever had the chance to change that story for someone else, I would." The screen behind her shifted, revealing blueprints, renderings, and infographics. Phase 1, 6 birthing centers across underserved regions. Phase 2, free prenatal care, counseling, and early childhood education support. Phase 3, a mobile app connecting single mothers to emergency housing, telemedicine, job training, and mentorship. And at the center of it all, a 24/7 hotline staffed by nurses who had walked the same path. "I didn't build this to save anyone," she said firmly. "I built it to remind women they were never broken to begin with." Applause rose, steady, then overwhelming. She stood tall, not as a nurse, not as a wife, not as a mother, but as a woman who had turned her private pain into public purpose. Backstage, Logan's throat tightened. He'd seen her in satin robes, in hospital scrubs, in laughter and in labor, but nothing compared to this. She wasn't his anymore. She belonged to something larger, to a mission, to a legacy, and that was exactly as it should be. Later, after the event wound down, he waited by the loading dock, away from cameras and champagne. She exited through the side, her heels clicking softly on the concrete. She spotted him instantly. No security. No speeches. Just two people beneath fluorescent light, the scent of warm asphalt around them. She didn't say a word. She walked right into his arms. He wrapped them around her, lifting her off the ground slightly. "I watched you," he whispered into her hair, "and I've never been more in awe of anything." She clutched the back of his neck. "It wasn't about awe," she said. "It was about making sure no woman felt like I once did." He set her down, hands still at her waist. "You've given them more than a foundation. You've given them fire." She looked up at him, smiling through happy exhaustion. "And you've given me the space to do it." They drove home in silence. No radio. Just fingers interlocked across the center console. At the estate, the twins were fast asleep, Petra snuggled between. Them on the couch with their nanny softly humming from the kitchen. Irene watched them for a moment, then turned to Logan. "Let's never stop building," she said. He kissed her temple. "We never will." The Geneva skyline sparkled beneath a twilight sky, sleek towers reflecting off the lake like a city made of stars. Inside the Global Innovation Forum's flagship amphitheater, world leaders, tech giants, and changemakers filled the grand space, an audience that had witnessed history in code, in spaceflight, in policy. But tonight, they were about to witness something far more personal. Backstage, Logan stood quietly, surrounded by handlers adjusting his mic, straightening his collar. He wore midnight blue, no tie, no unnecessary armor. He looked calm. But inside, something shifted. This time, it wasn't about what he'd built. It was about who he'd become. A stagehand gave the cue. He walked into the flood of light. Applause roared instantly. He was, after all, one of the youngest self-made billionaires on the global register. His company shaped everything from wearable health AI to climate-coded infrastructure. For years he had spoken at this summit. His ideas were covered. His predictions were dissected. But this time, he didn't bring a slideshow. He didn't bring talking points. He brought something more vulnerable. He stepped to the podium. Tonight, he began, voice measured. I was expected to speak on the next era of augmented cognition. But I've realized something, far more radical than neural networks or quantum learning. He paused, gaze sweeping the room. None of that matters. If we don't know how to feel. The auditorium hushed. Logan continued. I've spent my life building walls, empires, systems, defenses, all to ensure no one ever saw the boy who feared abandonment, or the man who mistook power for protection. He glanced down briefly, then looked back up with intent. But something happened. His hand gestured toward the side entrance of the stage. The curtain shifted. Irene stepped out slowly, regal in tailored white, poised, elegant, not introduced, not escorted, just radiant in her own right. Gasps, then silence, then camera shutters clicked like rainfall. Logan's voice softened. This woman changed everything. Irene stopped beside him, not at the podium, but slightly behind him. He turned. I used to measure my worth by shareholder returns, global indexes, and tech reviews. He reached for her hand, but she showed me how to measure love, by presence, by patience, by how you hold someone in their silence. His eyes didn't leave hers. She reminded me that the most revolutionary thing a man like me could do was surrender. He faced the audience, not in weakness, in wholeness. The audience was silent, utterly still. He stepped away from the podium. Then, without drama, without warning, he pulled her gently into him and kissed her. Not a showman's kiss, not a scripted pose, but the kind of kiss that quiets storms, that seals chapters, that says this is no longer a secret. Irene melted into it, one hand rising to his cheek, the other clasping his jacket near the chest. In that moment, the flash of cameras became inconsequential. No one was watching a billionaire. They were witnessing a man finally free. The clip would later flood every platform, not as gossip, not as scandal, but as a cultural moment. Logan Holt kisses partner at Global Summit, calls her his greatest innovation. The headlines varied, but the story was the same. A man once known for his ice now wore fire on his sleeve. He didn't apologize for it. He invited the world to see it. Backstage, Logan and Irene sat in silence after the panel. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, fingers laced. I didn't mean for that to go viral. She smiled, brushing her thumb across his wrist. I know. He looked at her. The lines at the corner of his eyes softened. I meant every word. I know, she said again. He exhaled slowly. For the first time, I don't feel like I'm hiding behind something. She leaned in. That's because you're finally standing beside someone. Later that night, the summit gala buzzed with champagne, orchestras, and polite conversations. But Logan and Irene skipped it all. They walked by the lake instead. No security, no handlers, just quiet ripples, cool air, and the occasional flash of someone who recognized them and respectfully stepped aside. Logan broke the silence. My father never told me he was proud, not once. Irene said nothing, just squeezed his hand. I think I spent years trying to prove something to a ghost. She finally spoke. And tonight? He looked up at the stars. I let the ghost go. They paused at a bench. He sat. She curled beside him, head on his shoulder. He kissed her hair. I used to think legacy was buildings, foundations, billion-dollar acquisitions. She looked up. And now? He smiled. It's moments like this. The rooftop was theirs again. No camera crews, no speeches, no sudden flashes of stardom. Just open sky, warm lights, and the quiet hum of life pulsing through the city below. A soft breeze carried hints of jasmine and sea salt, stirring the linen curtains that framed the rooftop's open edges. It was a night carved outside time. Irene stepped barefoot onto the cool tiles first, her silk wrap brushing lightly against her ankles. The twins followed, waddling with uneven steps, Luca clutching his stuffed lion, Lila clapping each time her feet made soft slaps on the ground. Petra arrived last, cradling a speaker in one arm and a bowl of strawberries in the other. She placed the bowl on a nearby table and set the speaker down. Soft jazz bloomed through the evening air, smooth, slow, warm as candlelight. Logan emerged from the glass doors, sleeves rolled, collar open, holding a single lit lantern. He placed it in the center of the rooftop's edge, just beside the old telescope he and Petra had built. No one said a word. They didn't have to. "Twirl me," Lila demanded, reaching both hands toward Logan. He scooped her up, spinning her gently. Her giggle peeled out into the stars like the purest kind of joy. Luca ran to Irene, clinging to her leg. "Up, Mama." She lifted him with practiced ease, swaying in rhythm. His head tucked into her shoulder, his curls brushing her collarbone. Petra twirled on her own for a moment, arms stretched wide, eyes closed. Then Logan reached for her hand. "Dance with me, my astronomer." Petra smiled, and they circled slowly, her small feet standing on his as he guided them gently through the music. Minutes passed, then more. The twins eventually grew drowsy, their bodies growing heavier in their parents' arms. Irene placed Luca onto the lounger beside Lila, both children blinking slowly as the music drifted around them. Petra took a seat beside them, humming quietly. Logan pulled Irene into his arms, one hand resting at her back, the other sliding up her spine. They moved as one, eyes closed, foreheads brushing. This dance wasn't for show. It was an exhale, a remembering, a vow without words. "Do you remember our first night on this rooftop?" He whispered. She nodded against his cheek. "You were the cold CEO, and I was the tired woman with no time for games." His mouth curved. "You fell asleep on me. You offered your arm." He leaned back slightly, looking into her eyes. "You brought me back to myself, Irene. Not the empire, not the awards. You—" She pressed her palm to his heart. "And you let me dream again." They stopped dancing, just stood there, surrounded by warmth, silence, and the quiet breathing of their children nearby. Logan walked to the edge of the rooftop and reached beneath the low wall. He returned with a small wooden box, unadorned, unassuming. He held it between them and opened the lid. Inside was a ring, not new, not flashy, vintage, a subtle gold band with two intertwined diamonds, one slightly smaller than the other, not for ceremony, not for spectacle, but for permanence. Irene's breath caught. He didn't get on one knee. He didn't need to. Logan held her hand, slipping the ring onto her finger. No announcement, no stage, just this. She looked down at her hand, then back at him, and nodded. That was all. The music played on. They sat by the telescope with the twins curled between them and Petra resting against Logan's shoulder. Irene whispered, "You know what this feels like?" He turned. She smiled. "Forever." He kissed her forehead. Not from ritual, not from passion, but from peace. From finally being home. The envelope arrived with no fanfare. No courier, no flashing headlines, just a modest white package with a blue seal that read, European Astroscience Consortium. It sat on the kitchen counter beside a bowl of peaches and a half-assembled, solar-powered model Petra had been helping the twins build. Irene spotted it first. She didn't open it. She simply called out, "Petra, something came for you." Petra emerged from the upstairs loft in socks and an oversized t-shirt that read, "Sky's not the limit," a gift from Logan years back. She saw the envelope, then froze. For a second, she just stared at it, her fingers hovering over the edge. Logan leaned against the counter, arms folded, watching her closely. "Take your time," he said. Petra didn't. She tore it open in one clean motion and pulled the paper free. Her eyes scanned the page. Irene placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. Petra's lip quivered. Then she let out a shaky laugh, more breath than sound. "I got in." Her voice cracked. "I got the grant." Logan stepped forward. "Petra." "I got in, Dad," she whispered again, turning to him. She was taller now, more poised. But in that moment, she was still the girl who once built cardboard planets and believed in second chances. He wrapped his arms around her. Not tight, just enough. Irene joined, enveloping them both. Luca and Lila clapped, even though they didn't fully understand the gravity of it all. But they didn't need to. They saw the pride. They felt the energy. They knew it mattered. That evening, Logan wheeled out the telescope once more, this time not for a lesson, but a celebration. They all took turns peering through the lens, tracking Saturn's rings and whispering wishes they wouldn't repeat aloud. Petra stood quietly beside him afterward, arms folded, her gaze on the stars, not as mysteries anymore, but as destinations. "You know," Logan murmured, "I was terrified when I first became your father." She didn't look at him, just smiled faintly. "I wasn't." He turned. She glanced his way. "I was just relieved someone finally stayed." Later, as Irene tucked the twins into bed, Logan watched from the hallway. Luca clutched a blueprint he'd scribbled that afternoon, his version of a robotic twin finder. Lila had drawn a spiral galaxy with her name hidden in the stars. "Are they?" Logan started. Irene nodded. "Already asking questions I can't answer." He smirked. "That sounds familiar." She joined him outside the room, gently closing the door. "They're not just curious," she said. "They're wired, like Petra, like you." Logan wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Then I guess we better keep up." Months passed. Petra left for Geneva, carrying with her a weatherproof case filled with designs, sensors, and a leather-bound notebook Logan had gifted her on her 18th birthday. Inside the first page was a simple inscription. "You didn't just reach for the stars, you made them reachable for others. Keep going." Luca and Lila helped pack her bags, hiding little notes inside her clothes. Stick, figures with hearts and rockets, their names signed in crooked block letters. The night before she left, the entire family gathered on the rooftop. No lanterns, no guests, just quiet. Petra stood between her parents and looked out at the sky. "I used to think the universe was massive and lonely," she said. "But now, I think it's wide because it was meant to be shared." Logan said nothing. His hand rested lightly on her back. Irene simply kissed her forehead. After Petra left, the house didn't feel emptier. It felt purposeful. Logan converted one wing into a workshop for the twins, complete with modular science tables, 3D printers, and a floor-to-ceiling magnetic wall for diagrams and solar maps. Luca insisted on naming it the Smart Lab. Lila countered with Starlight Zone. They compromised on Starlight Lab, their first invention, a solar-powered night lamp that glowed in constellations across the ceiling. Logan helped them build it. Irene recorded every minute. One evening, Irene walked into the study and found Logan alone, looking at Petra's old telescope. "She called this morning," Irene said softly. They gave her a segment on the orbital design panel. He turned, a slow grin forming. "Already?" "She said your notebook got her through her first night." He looked down. "Did I do enough?" Irene crossed to him. "You didn't just father her, Logan. You shaped her foundation." He exhaled. "And the twins? They're not waiting to be shaped," she said, smiling. "They're shaping us." Later that week, Irene came home to find Luca building a miniature model of their penthouse using cereal boxes and glue. "I'm making it earthquake-proof," he declared proudly. Lila walked in moments later, wearing a cape fashioned from her mother's scarf. "I'm the universe's protector," she shouted, spinning wildly until she landed on a beanbag. Logan peeked out from behind a whiteboard full of equations, raising one brow. "You okay, Captain Lila?" "I'm more than okay," she said with a grin. "I'm legendary." Outside, dusk gathered. Logan stepped onto the balcony, gazing over the skyline, the very one Petra once studied with awe. He wasn't thinking of figures or boardrooms. He wasn't mapping out his next expansion. He was watching stars rise. And for the first time in his life, the future didn't feel like something to control. It felt like something to trust. The rooftop was dressed in soft amber lights, strung low like stars brought closer just for them. No photographers, no flashing bulbs, no reporters. Just family. Just love. Luca sat cross-legged on a velvet cushion beside a makeshift altar, twiddling, with a ring box he'd insisted on guarding like a national treasure. Lila spun slow circles in a white tulle dress that billowed like a cloud, her curls bouncing as she hummed a tune only she understood. Petra stood quietly near the balcony railing, arms folded, a half-smile resting on her lips. Logan stood alone in the center, in a simple suit, no tie, no brand logos, no armor of wealth. Just a man, ready again. Irene emerged through the open glass doors. No train followed her. No bridesmaids announced her arrival. Just wind curling through her dark waves and a gown that shimmered not from sequins, but from the way it caught the last rays of evening sun. Logan's breath hitched. He had seen her in diamonds. He had seen her giving birth. But nothing compared to this woman who chose him again, not out of need, but love. Irene stepped forward slowly. No music played, only the soft whispers of the wind. Petra joined her midway, kissing her cheek and handing her a small bouquet of lilies, fresh, fragrant, wild. "Ready, Mom?" "Always." They met under an arch woven with vines and handwritten notes from the twins, folded into paper flowers. One read, "Daddy, say nice words, or we'll tickle you." Another, "Mommy, don't cry too much. You're already pretty." Luca sniffled dramatically from the sidelines. "I'm not crying," he muttered. "Just allergy stars." Lila elbowed him. "Stars don't make you cry, silly." "Then what's that on your cheek?" Petra asked, grinning. The laughter was soft and real, like the air itself had relaxed. Logan took her hands. They were smaller than he remembered. Or maybe he was just holding tighter. A breeze swept through, carrying the scent of orange blossoms planted at the corners of the rooftop, the same ones Irene used to water every Sunday at dawn. They stood in silence for a moment, letting the weight settle in. Then he spoke. "I used to think love was about timing," Logan said. "Catching it at the right moment. Holding it hard enough not to lose it." His voice didn't shake. "But you taught me something else, that love doesn't need perfect timing. It just needs truth." He glanced at their children. "At my highest I had empires. At my lowest I had regrets. But you stayed. You made everything real." He squeezed her hands gently. "You gave me a daughter I didn't know I was worthy of, and 2 more lives that redefined everything I thought I was capable of." He paused, his eyes glassy. "I promised to never lead with fear again. Only love." Irene took a slow breath. She didn't look down, not even once. "When I met you," she began, "I was falling. Out of hope, out of shelter, out of dreams." Her eyes never left his. "And somehow you caught me, not with promises, but with your silence, your arms, your effort." She blinked once. "Even when you were unsure, you stayed. And when you stumbled, you rose again. Not alone, never alone again." She leaned closer. "I vow to keep choosing you, on the quiet days, on the hard days, in the chaos and the calm, because love to me looks like this, like you." Luca opened the ring box with theatrical flair. Petra laughed and handed them each a band, silver, etched with constellations. Logan slid the band onto Irene's finger. She did the same. No officiant declared them anything. They were already everything they needed to be. As the final light faded into indigo, Irene wrapped her fingers around his and pulled him in, whispering something only he heard. He chuckled. And then, just as Petra lit the tiny sparklers lining the balcony, they kissed. Not out of ritual, not for tradition, just to remind the world this was there forever. The twins burst into applause. Petra snapped a photo, just one, and tucked the phone away. "Okay," Irene said, turning to her children. "You're all sleeping in your own rooms tonight." "New," Lila groaned, jumping onto Logan's leg. Luca grinned. "I'm sleeping in the telescope room." "Not a room," Logan replied. "It's a lab." Petra clapped once. "And the lab's closed tonight." Lila frowned, then leaned close to whisper in Logan's ear. "But Daddy, you said every love story needs a sleepover." He looked at Irene. She shrugged. "Well, she's not wrong." That night, they didn't retreat into wealth or walls. They spread out on the rooftop under thick blankets. Petra brought up hot cocoa and star maps. Lila fell asleep mid-sentence beside her mother. Luca dozed with one hand still holding Petra's wrist. Logan watched the sky, tracing the stars that once seemed too far to reach. Irene turned, resting her head on his chest. "You're still my favorite view," she whispered. He kissed her forehead. "And you're still my home." The sky above was deep velvet, no longer the showy blue of youth, but the matured twilight of forever. Logan sat cross-legged on the rooftop, Petra's latest constellation map spread between him and the twins. Their fingers were dusted with chalk as they drew stars directly onto the concrete floor with Irene's blessing. "We don't need a telescope tonight," Luca whispered. "We brought the sky down to us." Lila nodded, placing a tiny glow sticker of Saturn just beneath Logan's foot. "It's the Logan system," she declared. Petra raised an eyebrow. "Isn't that just Earth?" "No," Luca said. "It's cooler." Logan chuckled quietly, resting his palm over Irene's hand. She'd been watching silently, no makeup, no glam, just contentment in a soft robe, her feet bare, heart wide open. "Do you remember the plane?" she asked suddenly. He turned to her. "Which one?" She smiled. "The one. The flight where I fell asleep on your arm." He didn't blink. "The moment I stopped flying solo. 3 years earlier." The world was louder then. Logan had boarded the jetliner trying to escape another boardroom failure, papers in one hand, divorce lawyers calling the other. He didn't expect to sit beside a woman who curled up like she belonged there. Didn't expect her to mumble in her sleep. Didn't expect the way her touch, accidental, would feel more grounding than his entire fortune. Didn't expect to fall in love before the landing gear touched down. But he did. And somehow, she loved him too. Not the empire, not the name, just him. Back in the present, Petra broke the silence. "You two should write a book." Irene turned to her. "About what?" "About love. About believing again." Logan looked at her, this daughter who had changed his life without ever asking for anything in return. "You'll write it," he said. "You already do, in how you show up, in how you love." Petra looked down, a blush creeping in. "I just want people to know. Love isn't always instant, but it is possible." Irene nodded, eyes glistening. "That's the story," she whispered. "The one people need." As the night grew cooler, they lit a small circle of candles, one for each moment they never saw coming. One for that flight seat neither of them chose, but fate reserved. One for Petra, whose heart made room before Logan even asked. One for the twins, whose laughter cracked ceilings and softened hardened edges. One for every whispered apology. One for every second chance taken. And then, one final candle for tomorrow, because now they believed in it. Together. Final CTA and blessing. If this story moved you, if you've ever believed that love can find you in the most unexpected places, even in silence, if this story moved you, if you've ever believed that love can find you in the most unexpected places, even in silence, even after pain, even when you've given up, then don't let this be just a story. Let it be your reminder that it's never too late to love, it's never too early to hope, and it's never too far to be found. If you believe love can find you anywhere, even on a plane, comment, "I believe in divine encounters." Like, share, and subscribe to Love and Twilights, where stories remind us that love writes its own flight plan.